Welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television and then do it all over again the following week. My name is Colton Brown, and joining me is Andrew Meadows.
Colton Brown, I am excited to talk about these movies.
You're excited to talk about some movies, but you're probably less excited to relive the horror that 2020 was. Is that maybe a fair statement?
That's fair. So I'm excited to talk about these movies. I'm equally excited to finally close the book of 2021. Close that chapter and aside from maybe one or two of these movies that we're talking about, maybe a handful of these movies that I'm about to talk about, probably never revisit them ever again. Like it's just going to be forgotten, wiped from memory.
Yeah. 2020 was obviously sort of a lost year. We've talked about it on multiple occasions to this point. Anyone that was alive in 2020 knows the feeling of what it was like to live in 2020. And it's a feeling I think that, that the people that were fortunate enough to live through 2020 are likely to never forget. I would argue, We are, of course, for posterity's sake, talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, which wreaked havoc throughout the United States in a big, bad way, I think, overall. Ran its course through Andrew's immune system at one point as well, lest we forget. Fortunately, I to this date have avoided it. I'm actually a day away from receiving my second dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, which is very exciting. And so, obviously, vaccines are not foolproof, but they are a huge, huge step in the right direction for this country, and kind of turning the corner of a horrible year and a horrible, response to a pandemic that, in this country alone, has led to nearly 500,000 people dying. I think when all is said and done, I think we'll probably cross that threshold, which is a pretty horrifying thing to think about. 500,000 people dying, mostly because of an ineffective government response, but here we are. This is the position we find ourselves in. And obviously, it was not contained exclusively to the United States. I think obviously just living here and the fact that it is still, I think, pretty much an ever-present concern in our lives is kind of why it comes to mind and why we talk about it so frequently. Other countries, even though they may have done so well at the beginning of things, are in a better place. I don't know if you know this. This is such a fascinating thing that I read about yesterday. Of course, the virus from what we know originated in Wuhan, China, right?
The China virus.
The China virus, as our former president, and keyword there, former, like to say, it did originate there, and then kind of rapidly spread. And within the United States, I think we could, at a certain point, stop blaming China for the spread of it and just look inward for what happened there. But there was a movie called, I think, Detective Chinatown 3 that just came out in China this past weekend. Before us, we're recording on a Tuesday, and it came out this past weekend, and it set a new box office record, not for China, but for the entire globe of the most money ever made by a single market, like in a single market by a single film. So Avengers Endgame, I think, made somewhere in the neighborhood of, like, what, 300 something million. I don't even know what Avengers Endgame made. It made a stupid amount of money, I believe, in North America alone. And this movie broke that record.
What's it called?
It's called Detective Chinatown 3, which is to say, I think it's very much a Chinese-made film for Chinese audiences, something that Western audiences probably have little to no interest in. It's like it almost reminded me of a Rush Hour kind of buddy action kind of, vibe. Yeah, I mean, it did gangbusters in China. It made the equivalent of almost $400 million US. And
oh my gosh!
I don't know if that was including Wednesday grosses or exactly when it started, but that was in China. You know what I mean? And like, China is at a place where they're setting box office records, and we're at a place where most theaters are still closed. Theaters. You know what I mean? So like, some are open, and like, I think even the ones in Philadelphia are doing like, they're only open after 4 p.m. and, they're still obviously doing the limited capacity and space seating and all that. And it's just, I don't know, to me, it's a world of a difference. It's just really quite insane. I think it kind of, it ties into the fact that COVID sucks, and also, you know, it ties into the fact that obviously we are a film and television podcast, so it's certainly relevant to our interests. But that's just such a fascinating thing for me to think where we are, where we really have now been for almost a year, going on a full year, really, is really quite upsetting to think about. But nonetheless, I say all those things to make a point of the fact that 2020 again is a year that we will not forget. And as a result of that, as we have talked on countless occasions, it really, really fucked up the film and television landscape in a huge, huge way. In a way we had never seen before, in a way maybe has never been seen before in general, you know, beyond our lives, of course, you know. Certainly, you know, we live in a digital age where streaming, I think, you know, kind of reigns supreme for the most part, but there was always something for the theatrical market. You know, you always had your blockbuster films, your Avengers movies, your MCU movies, your whatever else, you know. It didn't even have to be a big blockbuster thing, but, you know, going to the theater is an experience. It's usually a shared experience, not always, of course, but it was something we missed out on, you know, and a lot of shared experiences, we kind of ended up getting deprived of them as a result of, you know, pandemic and trying to take precautions to at least curb the spread of it. And so what's the end result? We have a 2020 where, you know, production of film and TV shows had to be put on pause. Or in the case of something like Glow, which was renewed for like a fourth and final season, they just said, it's not worth going back and finishing it. We're just going to not do it. It's just done. It's just done, you know, and that's just insane to me. And of course, release date delays out the wazoo. We are missing, I mean, we didn't get a single MCU film in the entirety of 2020. We didn't get James Bond. We didn't get anything, really. We didn't really get anything big. You know, there were a couple things I think that ended up shifting to streaming, you know, getting sold off or whatnot. But the big guns, I think, were held back. Top Guns, Dune. We didn't get fucking Dune. You know, so many things. I think if you you know, you go back and look at the list of episodes that we put out, go look at 2020, look ahead, whatever number episode that was,
so
and listen
hopeful
to that. And we're just, you know, we had no idea what was coming. There's so much stuff that we're, you know, looking forward to, and I would venture to say we probably didn't get half of that, if not more, overall. So. Release date delays, and they're still happening, you know, and likely to happen. We have movies currently scheduled for April. We'll save this conversation for, you know, a more extensive variety of it for our next episode, where we look ahead to 2021 and hopefully look ahead to things that will indeed come out, but, you know, to be determined, I suppose. But yeah, theaters closed. I mean, when's the last time you stepped foot in a theater? It's probably been close to a year, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
You went to a drive-in, right? You know,
last movie I saw in theater was Sonic.
That came out in February. So
yeah, then it's been a year.
That was a Valentine's Day movie. It's been a year. It's been a year since that happened. I mean, that's insane. That's a whole year without stepping foot in a theater. Like, could you?
I have never,
for the people that we are. I mean, that's just wild.
I've gone to the movie theater once a month. I think easily once a month since I met you in like fourth or fifth grade. I've been to the movie theaters at least once a month. It was at least a once a month occurrence at the minimum. Sometimes four times, like, you know, once a week.
Yeah. Think about the glory days of AMC A-List. I mean, you know, paying $20 to see basically as many movies as you could possibly want to in any given month. Yeah.
Like the glory days. What a shit show.
So, you know, we're here to talk about 2020. We're here to do a year in review of 2020, and, you know, it was not a traditional year, I think is probably a safe thing to say. You know, a lot of movies ended up getting moved out of the year because studios weren't willing to take a loss, even when theaters did eventually open up. You know, they looked at Tenet coming out and said, "Oh, no thanks," you know, after how well that did. And you've had, you know, even Wonder Woman came out at the end of this year, and that was a hybrid theatrical and, you know, HBO Max day one debut, and we're going to see a lot of that in 2021 as well. We'll talk about that as well on the next episode. But what we did see is Netflix throwing a movie out or a TV show out almost every week. We didn't watch all of them, obviously, but I think it's fair to say that Netflix and other streaming services kind of helped to fill the void, or at least tried to fill the void. We had a lot of video on demand things. You know, there was a big Universal AMC shit show that happened at one point last year, if you recall.
We're not
AMC
playing
throwing
your
a
movies
fit.
anymore.
I was like, yeah, you might not exist. So, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right, aren't you? You know, we had no idea. We were pretty naive to think that theaters would be open a few months and everything will be kind of back to normal. Didn't exactly pan out that way, of course. But very wacky year, a very, very topsy-turvy year. And so it's just, we're treating this episode, I think, as much, you know, as closely as possible as we can to previous years. But I think it's fair to say the stock of films that we, you know, would ordinarily want to talk about is limited in many respects. I think it's limited, obviously, because the movies that we wanted to see, wanted to talk about, just didn't come out. And it's also limited in that, like, you know, they've put out a bunch of shit for like limited theatrical release, and we can't, you know, there's no way to watch that stuff. You know, I think about movies like Minari is a thing we saw the trailer for, talked about the trailer, and it has, you know, like the awards circuits are considering it for the best movies in 2020, but like it's not available to stream until like a week from now, and it's like, well, that's not a 2020 film to me. That's a 2021 film when it's coming out 2 full months into the year, and that's the only way to widely access it. And so yeah, I just, you know, our pool of movies is going to be a little bit wonky this year. I think what I tried to do, I think the fairest way to accomplish it, I think I set a sort of hard deadline at January 1st, in the sense that if the movie did not either receive a wide release or it was not available to stream before January 1st, for all intents and purposes, it will be a 2021 film. So anything before that January 1st date, you know, we're going to consider that a 2020 film. So Minari, Nomadland, Saint Maud, there's a few others that like we talked about and probably might be able to watch now or very soon, but Judas and the Black Messiah, another one, you know, like just came to HBO Max. Like those are movies that we'll probably want to talk about, whether we do full episodes on them or not. They're things that I want to see, certainly, and I would like to talk to you about. I think they've been on our radar for a long time, but we kind of had to decide how to do this, and so that's kind of the criteria I think we landed at, to kind of make it fair enough for us, and I think for our listeners as well, who are in the same position of not really having the access to a lot of these things in the same way as us. So with that said, that's kind of what's going to form the basis of what we're talking about in terms of the movies that we'll be talking about, TV shows as well. TV shows a little easier since they're kind of straight, you know, you don't go to a movie theater to watch a TV show typically. So that's fine. But other ground rules, just some parameters, I think, in general moving forward. Beware of spoilers. You know, most of these movies have been available to watch for some time. And so we'll probably, I think, sidestep anything major, of course, but, you know, it is possible that it'll come out and inadvertently slip from here to here. And these are our opinions, I think, is a very important disclaimer to lay down. We didn't watch everything, of course, you know, even within those parameters of kind of what we were considering eligible for what we're talking about. We did not see everything. I whipped up an extensive list that I think I ended up sending over to Andrew at one point. I probably watched a quarter of the things on there. I didn't, you know, Andrew's busy. He works, you know, he does fun things. He builds things for his home. I'm a little lazier. I do law school full time, but beyond that, I like to play Mario Kart and you know, a few other things. But we didn't get a chance to watch everything, and I think, at least for me, and I think this is going to be true, because the way I look at things is there is a pre-COVID life and there is a post-COVID life. I think there's a little bit of recency bias that's going to creep in, which is to say that pretty much anything that came out before theaters shut down, that feels like 13 years ago.
It does.
You know? Like,
that's remarkable.
So it's hard to, you know, I some of those movies I am going to talk about, you know, I am going to recognize those, you know, when we're talking about things, but some of them I'm like, I don't remember this very well. I remember liking it. Could I tell you what it was about it? No, because I watched it 13 years ago, which is obviously not true in actuality, you know what I mean? But damn, does it feel like it sometimes. So I think there's a little bit of recency bias in the sense that You got to live. You got to work with short-term memory at this point in your life. I think if you get caught up in the big details of life, it's just depressing. It's just how I feel about it. So I'm going to ask you just kind of a general question. We are going to go into TV stuff initially, and then we'll kind of work into films, and we'll do just general categories, technical categories, a best of list, and stuff like that. Very very similar vibe and concept to what we've done with our past years in review, but as a general kind of matter, coming off the back of everything that I've now said for a while. I think this is an easy one to answer, but how does 2020 stack up in terms of film and television for you?
So you send me the categories that we want to cover, and
it's a struggle.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's some very good movies there's good stuff that came out this year, right? But then, you look at the particular category you're looking at, and you're like, I don't know. Normally when you go to the movie theater, it's something. For example, 1917 cinematography was incredibly impactful on large screen format. You know what I mean? It's something that you can, don't get me wrong, you can appreciate it on the small screen as well, but I mean, fuck, it left an impact on just because of the format you watched it in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing goes with I think a lot of the technical stuff like that, like your audio design. If you go to a theater and you go to a badass with just theater sound, you can appreciate sound design when you're in a fucking loud theater. You can appreciate cinematography or the way certain things are shot. I think you can appreciate them a little bit more when it's massive, So it made some of the more technical categories a little bit more difficult, But the pool of things that we had to draw from was not a pool. It was more of like a puddle of things to draw from. I think that arguably some of the best content that came out this year came out in for television, or what we would consider television shows.
Yeah.
I think that's arguably the best things that came out this year. It was a real rough year. For a lot of different reasons. I think the funniest thing that you've said so far this episode is there's a post-COVID life and there's a pre-COVID life. I mean, that's a bookend. Those are bookends in our forever life. I never built the first thing until Sarah got stuck at home and wanted to do house projects.
Yeah,
she would have Chip and Joanne Gaines on TV, and hey, let's do this. Well, fuck, we can't afford to rebuild the house, So I took it to myself because I'm not going to the movie theater once a week. Once a week, maybe I'll start tinkering and building stuff. Post-COVID life, I'm Tim the Toolman Taylor in the garage.
You got a whole workshop set up in there now. It's quite the transformation, absolutely.
So I mean, you come out of it different than what you went in. But I think the industry, things are different in the industry of film and television than they were going in.
If you don't take shit seriously, Tom Cruise will rip your fucking head off. And threaten to fire you in a very loud and boisterous way.
Good for him, Yeah. And I think you see a lot of innovation. You see the innovation in The Mandalorian with the way that they chose to shot a lot of their sequences and stuff using using what they call the fucking what they call that thing, the giant wall of screens.
Is it the Foundry, the Volume, something?
The Volume. It's called the Volume. Yeah. That's it. So you see a lot of innovation come in in the way that things are shot now, and which is cool, So there's good things that came out of this year. You go through the crucible, you come out different, and it changes things in a big way. And as long as you're willing to innovate and change with the dynamics that are going on around you, I think there's a lot to be had with what we've come out with. I think that's the most optimistic point of view to have is that, perhaps things changed and some things changed for the better, but we'll see moving forward, I guess,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, certainly.
It definitely, I will tell you this. There's always been an appreciation with practical filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
But even though technology's advancing and with like things like the volume and stuff like that, I think that it builds appreciation for practical filmmaking too. You know what I mean? So there's going to be two ends of that spectrum. But anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent.
Well, that's quite all right. So would you say, the streaming services filled the void of not being able to go to theaters? Or
what a time to have a streaming service, right? Like,
yeah,
I bet their fucking market share is just through the fucking roof.
Yeah. Well, you got new ones popping up. It seems like almost every week, or they're rebranding themselves. CBS All Access is soon
Paramount
Plus, and everything's got to be plus. So yeah,
and I mean, it was inevitable. The internet, it's going to happen.
But this may have turned the tide a little faster than people might have otherwise expected it to. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
so
what I will say, if nothing else, is that fucking Bill and Ted got us through some dark times. So we do owe some recognition and some respect to Bill and Ted for allowing us to party on in our own rooms with no one else around us. And to be excellent to each other online over Zoom. So
I heard somebody fucking said that. I wish I could remember who said it. I feel like I was talking to somebody on the phone at the car lot, like one of the banks or something. And you say, have a good day. Thank you, whatever. And I swear to you, this dude said, be excellent. Be excellent, man. I'm like, fuck yeah. Party on, dude.
Yeah. Party on, dude. Click. All right. Well, why don't we get into things, huh? Why don't we start with some television, all right?
Let's kick it off.
All right. So, television, we are keeping all the same categories as last year. And we start with worst television show. Now, I'm going to answer first because I know what yours is, and I think this is another opportunity for you to really expand on the show that you're going to choose. I didn't have a good answer for this. I really didn't watch that much bad television this year, which is to say that you're stuck at home a lot. You curate it best you can. You don't go through a 2-week quarantine as a result of getting COVID and just watch any old thing that comes on that catches your eye that maybe seems interesting, and then you just grind your way through it like some people on this call might have. But I picked something I didn't even finish.
Okay, well,
second season of Altered Carbon was just bad.
Okay, yeah.
It was just bad. It was a totally different show from its first season, which I think was good, not great. This was, I mean, obviously, they recast the lead as a part of the story design, but I think they replaced everyone behind the scenes for the most part, and it felt like a CWI'd version of that first season, which was very gritty and bloody and, nudity everywhere and, very Blade Runner kind of aesthetic, and this just felt so restrained or hamstrung or, by budget or something like that. It just was not good. So I didn't finish it. It got canceled subsequently. Didn't hurt my feelings. But I really didn't watch that much bad shit, which is good. That's a good thing I can say. I don't have that badge that you're going to talk about momentarily. But worst for me was Altered Carbon Season 2. But the worst for you was none other than
Raised by Wolves.
HBO Max original.
By a fucking long shot.
Yeah.
By like an intergalactic long shot. Infinitely long. I'll put it to you this way. So there's a lady that I talked to. Her name's LaShonda. She works at the bank. And Shonda is, they're big movie people. They have good theater at their house. They're always watching stuff. She watched The Stand on whatever it is.
That's on CBS All Access.
Yeah.
Soon to be Paramount Plus, whatever.
And she said, we started the show, and it was meandering, and we just, we were like, it started out interesting, so we started watching it, and we were vested by the time we were halfway through, and it just was downhill ever since, and it was just really bad. And I was like, Shonda, I know what not to recommend you for bad I know I'll recommend Chernobyl. If you haven't seen Chernobyl, that's probably some of the best television I've ever seen. Incredible show. But what you need to avoid at all cost is Raised by fucking Wolves. That is the worst thing I've ever seen. It's fucking terrible. The acting is just fucking... I don't know what I'm sure these people are very talented, the people on screen, okay? But the direction that they were given, the premise was fucking awful. It was just... I can go on for days about how bad Raised by Wolves is. The android had sex with a program inside the computer, which was a virus that infected her with a giant snake. This giant snake comes out, and she births this giant snake that flies, and it continues to grow. They shoot it through the center of the planet. This is spoilers, by the way. I think this is the last episode, so I'm spoiling it for you.
Okay.
But the core of the planet and the molten lava didn't do anything, and it shoots out of the planet with the fucking space snake that's made from the android, from the pregnancy she got from the computer virus inside her stasis pod. It's fucking terrible. Don't watch this. Don't watch this show. Don't start it, because then when you start it, you want to say, okay, well, that was a pilot. I'm curious as to what happens next. Which is what I said. I've got the COVID. I've got 105 fever. I'm sitting here. I'm sweating my ass off. Trying to make it through. Maybe there's light at the end of this tunnel. And no light fucking came. It was just a fucking dark time in my life.
Yes, darkness.
It was absolutely horrendous. So, by a long shot, kudos to you. Fucking... the fuck's his name? Ridley Scott. You need to retire.
Produced by Ridley
putting your name
Scott.
on shit. And that's what I told Sean. I said, Ridley Scott needs to retire. And she's like, yes, he does. So, anyways, that's Raised by Wolves. It's fucking terrible. Worst thing I watched all year.
Well, I knew it was coming, and I suspect anyone that has listened to a few of the previous episodes did too. But I'm always game for an Andrew rant about things being bad. One thing I think I did forget to mention, we didn't cover Raised by Wolves. We didn't have an episode dedicated to it, which is to say that I was saved the misfortune of having to watch it for the purposes of this podcast. But a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about, I think especially so this year, we probably have an episode for it. Because what it was is that because we didn't have the volume of content coming out in theaters the way we did, we had to turn to those streaming services to fill that void, as much as we could. And it was really a case of shit, what's coming out this year? That's mildly interesting. I guess we'll watch Enola Holmes. You know what I mean? That sort of shit. We're just I guess we'll do it.
What are our choices? What do we got?
What
to
else
lose?
we got? It's either that or take a month off. So what are we gonna do? So I think a lot of these, I think that we will, like I said, with the very exception of the recent stuff, because we haven't covered a ton of stuff recently in terms of new content. I think if you want to hear fuller thoughts on anything, there's a good chance you can go back and listen to an episode of ours to get that kind of fuller perspective on it. However, Raised by Wolves is not one of those. So, all right. So, do you have any honorable mentions or anything that you started that you haven't finished that you think would have cracked the top 5 of television shows this year?
Yes, I do. So,
let's hear it.
the first one I want to say that I will definitely nominate. I did not include it in my nominations this year because I wasn't exactly sure. I didn't go through the trouble of looking up when it started airing because I was late to the show.
Yeah.
But I will be locking it in this year. I have no doubts that I will be locking it in this year. Is The Expanse. Season 5 of The Expanse was fucking incredible. Really,
yeah, that
really
one's a weird
enjoyed
one because it probably started 2020 and will finish in 2021, right? Like, because of the way Amazon did their release date drops.
Exactly, and it was, and I only caught it in 2021.
Right. Okay.
So there's a lot of good television that came out this year, and I'll just spread the butter over to 2021.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I think if it finishes in 2021, I think it's fair to, you wouldn't have been able to experience the entirety of it before January 1st. So
correct.
By that token, it kind of gets lumped into the next one. All right, that's a good call. Anything else that fits that bill or is an honorable mention that couldn't quite crack the top 5 for you?
So I will do Westworld.
Okay.
Westworld did not make my top 5, solely because of it felt like it was 13 years ago kind of token.
I was technically sort of in the midst of the pandemic, but very early days, I think. I think that was like March, April time, something like that. So, yeah for all intents and purposes, it might, maybe not 13 years, maybe 12, something like that. But
yeah, like it just seems so far away.
Sure.
And it didn't leave like another show on my list left a really good impact on me, and I remembered a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Where I can't remember a whole lot of what happened this last season of Westworld. Like I can remember bits and pieces, but it kind of, especially because it's season 3, I think it is. Mm-hmm. It just kind of like melds into the rest of Westworld. And then the last honorable mention was The Witcher. This was on my list until I started looking at our episodes, and I stumbled upon something I can't believe I forgot, and which quickly booted it off the top 5.
Okay. I think Witcher probably would have been a 2020 show as well. I think we would have, a 2019 show. I think we would have covered it in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. I think we were just very delayed in getting around to covering it. So I don't know.
Okay, good.
I think it came out December 19, and it was an all at once Netflix drop. So probably technically wouldn't qualify, although we probably would have watched it maybe going into 2020. So.
I know we covered it in 2021.
We definitely covered it in 2020, but I think we were just behind the curve on a lot of things. So, yeah, it didn't make your top 5, and I think it fits the bill of 2019 show that you might have watched in 2020, because I have something like that I do think you actually did rank The Witcher when we were talking about our stuff, for 2019 anyway. So
okay,
it doesn't matter. You're mentioning it again. You enjoyed it, and that's all well and good. And now you have a nice original soundtrack to listen to sometimes. So, I got it for him for Christmas. That's why I'm talking about it. Don't worry about it. So yes, I have kind of something that I think fits very much in line with your description of The Witcher, and that is Watchmen, which was definitively a 2019 show.
Never
but it was
watched
one
it.
that I was in the midst of watching when we recorded our counterpart to this episode last year, and I was just like, I'm pretty sure if this finishes the way that it started, it would have been in the top 5. And I can retroactively say that without a doubt, it probably would have been at least in the top 2. I don't know what it would have booted out of the top. I think maybe Chernobyl was like there, so I don't know if I, in good conscience, could have knocked down Chernobyl, but I think I had Mandalorian season 1 as number 2, and I would put Watchmen above that. So, Watchmen is incredible. It still is worth a watch for anyone that is looking for things to watch. So I did think it was worth it to shout it out now that I have finished it in its entirety.
I got excited at Best Buy.
All its entirety, since I don't think we're going to get another season of it. So
I saw they had a deal on the Blu-ray, and I was looking for the 4K Blu-ray. Couldn't find it.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. So
that's why I couldn't find it. Yep.
Yeah, I ended up buying the Blu-ray for like $10 because I'm just like, fucking HBO can't bother to do 4K on their streaming service except for brand new movies, and they can't bother to put this shit out on 4K on home video when it is something that absolutely needs it, and it's just dumb. But
that's really lame. I should have bought that deal. I'm sure it'll come back
Yeah,
around.
it'll come back around, I'm sure. Yeah. So, anyway, my other one that is basically now the equivalent of Watchmen this year, which is to say that I started it and didn't finish it, and that probably would have cracked the top 5. I can, without a doubt, say it would have replaced number 5 on this. And I think it's something that you're going to talk about in your top 5, without a doubt, is Queen's Gambit, because I'm only on episode 5 of 7. Did not finish it. Unfortunately, Anna liked the first episode, but it was difficult to watch.
It's topical.
And just not exactly what she was looking for in her current and our current times, I guess we'll say. And so I've kind of had to keep watching it on my own in my limited kind of time where I'm not watching it around her. So it has made it more difficult for me to watch it. And so I haven't had the opportunity to just completely finish it. But it's very good. It's very well made. I'll defer to you because it's going to come up at some point in your top 5. I don't know what your top 5 is, but I can say it's going to be in your top 5. So I'll kind of defer to you for whenever that comes around. I don't know where it'll be in your list, but it'll be on there somewhere. So I'm greatly enjoying it so far. Anya Taylor-Joy is great in it, and it's just very stylishly well shot and interesting, and makes chess. I like chess. I like playing chess, but it makes watching people play chess somehow interesting. So that's always good. So my 3 proper honorable mentions that I'll say: Westworld season 3, I'm co-signing on. It was good, but not great. A very stylish season, but more style over substance, I think, overall. Not the most memorable thing. It felt like that future setting really could have been something cool, and it was cool, but not that cool, I guess. Star Wars, The Clone Wars, the final season, I think is probably just a hair outside of my top 5. And I only say that because its last arc is probably like some of the best television, but the other arcs weren't nearly as good as that. You know what I mean? Like as a season, as taken in as a whole, it was not. They all did not live up to that last 4-episode arc. But it was still very good, very enjoyable, and very well done, and kind of a nice, welcomed thing to have back. During a pandemic, certainly. And I got to shout out The Good Place season 4, the final season of The Good Place, which I really, really enjoyed. However, it wrapped up in January, so I remember liking it. I don't remember much beyond that. I could not tell you a whole lot about that season, other than I remember liking it. And I think it ended the show in a nice manner for all the characters. But I like, if I had to justify why it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, I'd just be like, well, I don't know, So it was a tough one for me. So I know I liked it enough to make it minimally in my top 10 for the year, but top 5, it just seems hard to kind of throw it in there. So that's what I got for honorable mentions. Let's do our top 5 television shows ranked in order for the year. We'll bounce back and forth as we typically do. We'll start at 5, work our way down to 1. So number 5. I guess it's my turn. We usually alternate, I think, the order of how we do this, right?
Yeah, right.
It's been a year or so since we've done it, so I'm getting back on my feet. Number 5 for me is Lovecraft Country.
Okay.
Which I liked a lot, but I found it to be inconsistent. I think at its best, it's some of the best television that came out last year. And at its worst, it's not some of the worst television that came out last year, but it's mediocre, and it's like, this is capable of so much more, and we see the more so often in that show that when it wasn't that, it was disappointing. And I think that it ended with, unfortunately, one of the more mediocre episodes. It didn't leave on a note that made me feel that show was amazing. And I think we talked about it. This is one we covered. It was one where the first episode was probably the best episode of the show.
Yes.
And so it's kind of
it's more what you expected at the very least.
Yes, maybe that's a better way of looking at it. I mean, the show went in weird, different directions, and I think a lot of them worked really well, and it was really interesting, and the cast was awesome. An amazing, amazing cast in that show. But had some amazing episodes, enough for me to just single-handedly need to throw it in the top 5 somewhere, but it left me wanting in some other respects, and I'm game for a season 2 whenever that comes along. But that's kind of where I landed with it at number 5 for me. What's your number 5?
So, to follow up your Lovecraft Country, that belongs in my honorable mentions. I did not put it in my honorable mentions solely for the exact same reason. Inconsistent.
For sure.
Yeah, same. I don't want to I don't have to reiterate the same thing. I mean, it's just wildly inconsistent. Not wildly inconsistent, but
disappointingly inconsistent, I feel.
Correct. Yeah. My number 5 is Castlevania.
All right.
This last season of Castlevania was fucking balls to the fucking bonkers, dude. It was so good. So good. I think this season was better than the previous season. And it feels like it was a long time ago. Mostly because the episodes I think are shorter. I think it had a longer episode count, which was nice. But it was bonkers, just bonkers crazy. Enjoy the animation style. I enjoy the characters of the show. Certainly vested in them. And it ended with a crescendo. Like, it was just fucking cool. It was a really cool show. So number 5 is Castlevania.
My number 4 is season 3 of Castlevania. So
nice,
that works out well because I can just dive right into my thoughts, which I think are largely similar. It is an insane show. Unfortunately, small caveat, the creator of that show, or the writer and creator of it, Warren Ellis, we have now learned is a piece of shit who likes to prey on women. So
I did not know Warren Ellis was a piece of shit.
It puts a little bit of a damper on my enthusiasm for the show. I think that basically he's already written scripts for season 4, and so they're making it, and then I think they're kind of severing ties with him. So, it's one of those things where that obviously...
Love the art, hate the artist.
Yeah, that's a huge bummer, obviously, because I think that the show has really been very good through its 3 seasons, and I want to like the people behind doing it, and obviously, that's not the animation team, that's not anyone else that's really working on it, and that's not the producers on it, but that is a bummer to kind of have that on the back burner with it. But I think separating that, if you can, if you're allowed to, and certainly I think I am, because we didn't have that information when we watched the show. We watched it purely on its merits, not really with regard to that in mind. But it had a difficult task of taking the story in a direction which, I think basically season 2 ended with Dracula is dead. Dracula has been slain. Like, that's a pretty big deal. And season 3 is like, okay, what next? And I think it kind of separated the characters out. Alucard had his own thing with, I think, the twins or whoever they were, and then obviously Trevor and Sypha were kind of off together, and you got that one fucking Bill Nighy character. I forget the character's name, but just totally bonkers shit with his character. It was kind of spread out, but it was really interesting and fun. And stuff with Hector and Isaac, who were 2 cool characters from season 2. Like, it just I think what it did with those characters and exploring each of their individual journeys was just really, really well done. And the animation's great. It's definitely one of the best video game adaptation anythings, I think, that's come out in a long, long while. And it lived up to the standard of its 2 predecessor seasons, and we had a longer episode count, so we had more of it to enjoy. So yeah, that one was for me. That the Castlevania, it's a very cool show. It deals with a very cool concept, and it's done exceptionally well. So hopefully that continues with or without Warren Ellis moving forward.
And for the record,
I want to see more, but
I didn't know any of this. He's a huge piece of shit.
I assume you're reading up on it at this point.
Yeah.
It's
roughly 100 women came forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gee whiz. Whoa.
So yeah,
that's not good.
So, like I said, we are not obviously here condoning his actions or saying that because he made Castlevania that like he that makes him okay. I think you have to look at it in a vacuum, and it's like I said,
he did make Iron Man 3 in some way. He was associated with Iron Man 3, which was a piece of shit. So
I think he wrote the Extremis story arc, which was loosely adapted for Iron Man 3. So I think that's
which was a pretty cool story arc. God damn it, Warren Ellis, you piece of shit.
So yeah. Anyway, obviously you can be talented and also be a piece of shit. So we'll call him a talented piece of shit, which it is what it is, I suppose. So let's go on to your number 4.
My number 4 is Queen's Gambit.
Okay. All right, I was wondering if it would place higher, but I knew it would be on there somewhere.
Okay, so Queen's Gambit I will say that Queen's Gambit probably deserves higher. Queen's Gambit is an absolutely incredible show. The technical merits of this show are without question. They are so fucking good. I really like this show. It would not be hard to see this show as a number 1 or number 2 choice. I strictly put Queen's Gambit as number 4 because 1, 2, and 3 are just my shit.
Sure.
Okay?
These are our opinions. We can do whatever the hell we want.
That's it. I mean, I'm predisposed to the content of 1, 2, and 3 before I am predisposed to watching people play chess and the adversity that the young lady goes through, right? Like it's a drama show. Sci-fi and things are I'm more predisposed to sci-fi and stuff than I am drama shows. Not to its detriment though. Queen's Gambit is an absolutely incredible show and wholeheartedly deserves higher than number 4. But the things from 1, 2, and 3 just put them in a different spot. It's apples and oranges. And ultimately I've got to place it somewhere. It deserves placement that's probably higher based on the technical merits, the acting, the set design. Queen's Gambit would have Anna Taylor-Joy would have probably got Best Actress if I could pick a lead actress for a television show for my Best Actress. Set design would have won on this show. And probably I really enjoyed the score of this show. So probably even the score. But be it what it is, it's number 4.
Okay. I wonder, I think our top 3 are going to be the same shows, but I'm wondering if we're going to have the same order of them. So we'll see. My number 3 is Devs.
My number 3 is Devs.
All right, so we're on the same track so far. So let's talk about Devs. Devs is one of those shows I think that did come out a while ago, but I think maybe it was the one you were alluding to earlier when you said that you kind of stuck with you more and you remembered more of it. Is that what you were
That's
thinking
correct.
about? Yeah.
Yep.
Devs is a heady fucking show, but it's good. And it's such a, I love the concept of Devs. I think it's such an interesting thing. Alex Garland, I think he did he direct the whole thing? I think he did.
I think he did.
I think he did. I think he pretty much wrote and directed the whole shebang of it. I think 8 episodes, and it deals with this mysterious tech company who's, got this mysterious research team and what are they up to, and just the visuals of it, the acting in it. Nick Offerman, who's fucking fantastic in this show. I don't know. It just felt like such a weird out there thing. And there's one film that it ended up in my top 10 as a preview of coming attractions that just is just a weird fucking bonkers out there sort of thing. And I just like that vibe sometimes. Like, I don't need exclusively that vibe. Like, I like mainstream things too, but Devs is just kind of an out there kind of show that's not going to appeal to everyone. But I think that for you and I, it's the kind of show that we like, and it is very much an Alex Garland show. It's very much in the vein of Ex Machina and Annihilation, while still very much being its own different thing too.
Yeah. The way they deal with, they grapple with the power of tech companies and what it is to be on the bleeding edge and what you have access to when you have the bleeding edge of technology and stuff. I mean, just and how and what it is to, I don't know. There's just a lot going on in that show. Like you say, it's a heady piece. It leaves you thinking, especially when you, even after the last episode, and you have to dwell into the concepts of what it laid out. You know what I mean? And the consequences of the show. It's just a really fucking cool show. Really cool show.
Yeah, and I think it engages in a lot of moral and philosophical debates and ideas and concepts, and I don't know. It's just one of those shows that, it's honestly one of those shows that if there weren't 2 things that just were even more my shit, just it's the Queen's Gambit, I guess, for me. Of I could see this being a number one.
Yeah. Well, I think
and
it's
a
the
particular
case
given year,
anytime you
maybe.
get into these top, when we have to rank the things, usually when we get into the ranking of the things, usually your top 3 or your top 4 or whatever, you start to get to a point where you can almost, for various reasons, you can almost interchange them a little bit. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, there's little separation. I think that's absolutely true. Yeah.
So, but yeah, Devs was definitely worth a watch.
All right. Well, any other thoughts on Devs?
No,
Should we get on to
keep on.
perhaps our collective number 2? We'll see.
Oh, shout out. We covered
out.
the Devs.
We did cover Devs, so check out our conversation on Devs. Number 2, I had season 2 of The Boys.
I too had season 2 of The Boys.
All right. Well, I think our number 1's definitely going to line up then. I think I got a good feeling about it. But The Boys knocked it out of the park with another very strong season, and one that, had the capability of just hitting the ground running, after it has established the tone and the plot and the characters of season 1. Season 2 just doubles down on all of it and does it in such a huge and satisfying fashion. This show is insane. There's
It's
nothing
visceral.
like The Boys out
It's
there.
fucking bonkers. It's crazy. It seems grounded in its own crazy, ridiculous way.
It's a grounded take on ridiculously powered superheroes. You know what I mean? Like, if Superman was allowed to exist and he was a psycho, like this is what would happen. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of it. Or if Aquaman was a sexual predator and got called out on his shit, this is what would happen.
And he was sent to fucking Toledo.
That sort
Oh
of
god,
thing.
he takes the whale to the beach. And
The boat.
he's talking to his gills.
If a Nazi had superpowers, that it gets with that head on, so it's insane. It's out there, but it was still topical, I think, in many ways.
Yeah.
And did it in its, I guess, perhaps patented, outlandish, ridiculous fashion, but it was bloody. It was definitely bloody.
It's rated R.
Lots of whale
sure.
guts. It's rated R. If you want to put that on a TV show, for sure. But I just think it went super interesting places with its characters, and hard, heavy hitting places with those characters. But it still had the satisfaction of just Soups getting their asses kicked. I mean, I just still think about the girl power scene.
Yeah.
Stands out to me as just like an absolute like all-time moment from that show.
When did they put when they put the grenade inside the Invisible Man? Was that season 1 or season 2?
I think that was season 1.
Okay.
Yeah, because then he explodes. Yeah. I think that was season 1. But there's lots of exploding heads in season 2.
That's true. Yep.
And we know that it's set up for very interesting and wild season 3. I don't know. It just really hit the mark. It's a fun fucking show to watch. Just relentlessly entertaining television, I think, with The Boys on
For
Amazon.
sure. Yeah. Oh, and we also have an episode on The Boys as well.
And we also have an episode on The Boys. And we also have an episode on season 2 of The Mandalorian, which is our collective number 1. I phrased it as a question, but it's a facetious one.
I meant to put that in my honorable mentions.
Oh.
No, it is definitely my number 1. Number 1, Star Wars is our shit. We eat up some Star Wars.
And we ate up season 1 of The Mandalorian.
That's right. And season 2 of The Mandalorian. Wait. Season 1 of The Mandalorian was that this year too?
I think regardless of when it finished, we calculated into the previous year. I think it finished around the time that Rise of Skywalker came out. I think it technically finished before January of 19. So I think they were compartmentalized season 1, 19, season 2 in 2020.
Gotcha. So I think The Mandalorian season 2 I think we both, if I remember correctly, I think we both found it more consistent. We found the more so than season 1, there was a constant like pushing forward the main story arc, which was cool. I appreciated that. I mean, this first season was, it was cool that it was just like one-off adventures here and there, but it was cool that the adventures that he went on perpetuated the story, which I think was cool. Season 2, they brought back fucking Boba Fett, and he kicks ass with that Robert
Boba Fett. Where?
Yeah, man, dude. Ugh. And I think for the first time, the Mandalorian was, or not the Mandalorian, Star Wars was visceral. Like, it was just hardcore action with Jango Fett, or not Jango, but Boba Fett. Really cool. They pulled a bunch of stuff from previous from Clone Wars and from Rebels and
the fucking books from the canon novels.
Yeah.
Timothy Olyphant coming in playing a fucking book character. Like,
yeah.
What?
It's just it's the culmination of like all things Star Wars. Said it last year with season 1. I'll say it again. The Mandalorian is more Star Wars than like a lot of things that we've seen Star Wars come out in live action. It is, for all intents and purposes, like Star Wars. Like, it is of course it is Star Wars, but I mean, it's
the best Star Wars we've gotten since the Disney acquisition, I think.
Correct.
And I think you and I like The Last Jedi a lot. Vast swaths of the internet do not agree with us. I think The Rise of Skywalker was disappointing for many, and people like Force Awakens have polarized opinions on that. But I think the sequel trilogy gets lumped into the conversation of, is this better or worse than the prequel trilogy? The Mandalorian is not part of that conversation. It is very much a separated point of, yeah, they really got it right there. I think there's very little, consternation on the internet about The Mandalorian. You know what I mean? So
it's incredible show. And I mean, outside of Star Wars, Sarah watches The Mandalorian. Sarah doesn't like The Boys. Sarah doesn't watch Devs. Okay? Sarah did like Queen's Gambit. But she doesn't watch Castlevania. Okay? But she watches The Mandalorian. So it's really cool that you have you got a show here that's all things like nerdy and Star Wars, but it's got such widespread success, and it really it's a really proud time to be a Star Wars fan, that you have something like The Mandalorian coming out and bringing new people into Star Wars. And it's cool, it's exciting. Can't wait for season 3. Can't wait for all the things coming out in the near future with all things Star Wars.
But we're getting fucking 3 Mandalorian spinoff of sorts, so you know what I mean. So
it's incredible. But we won't be seeing Gina, whatever the fuck her name is, anymore.
We won't be seeing a Gina Carano around in any future seasons.
You will catch her in that fucking asshole with the squeaky voice. What's his name?
But yeah, she'll be in a film produced by Ben Shapiro, available exclusively on Ben Shapiro's website for the fucking people that have been grifted into fucking paying for that dog shit.
What an incredible accomplishment! I left Star Wars and went to Ben Shapiro.
It's a real step up in her career. She's doing great. Yeah.
What defines asshole? Well, I left the worldwide phenomenon and went to work for Ben Shapiro. Yeah, good move.
Ben, my wife's vagina has never been wet for me, Shapiro. I think that's the one we're talking about.
Reference Ben Shapiro reading the lyrics of WAP. Fucking Ben Shapiro.
Anyway, Mandalorian season 2 was great. Lots of, good fan servicey type moments in terms of character introductions and bringing stuff into the fold. But each episode really was still self-contained, but still in service of that greater mission that the Mandalorian was on. And you had Mandalorian and little I was going to say his real name. I don't know if we should spoil that, but Baby Yoda, Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian going on, these misadventures together, and the payoff of all that was each episode. There was something that I think, the production design of it was really cool. Ludwig Göransson's score is a through line of that whole show.
Absolutely fucking incredible.
Just so good. And I do think that, the characters they brought in and the actors that they got for those roles, like even characters that came back, like, Bill Burr comes back at one point and he's fucking great.
Yeah.
All really good. Good
Bill
action,
Burr. Bill Burr
good stuff,
stole the
but
fucking
also
show
just
with
good
that.
Star Wars stuff. Yeah, he did. He was great. So yeah, really good show. And then when you offer a really good show that's just packed to the brim with Star Wars goodness, it's the sweet spot, I think, for the two of us, really.
Mm-hmm.
Which is evidenced by the 4 hours that we talked about it between our 2 episodes on it, which were originally 1 episode. So that concludes our coverage of television, does it not?
It concludes it. Time to go on to
the wide
puddle
world
of film.
Let's kick it off with the worst film of 2020. If we may be so bold, what do you have for the worst film of 2020?
So my worst film of 2020, it was a toss-up.
Okay. Couple contenders.
So I was going to say Harley Quinn or the Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn.
He said the whole title. Oh my goodness.
I was going to say that one, but I listened to the way I left it and the way we reviewed it. So I'm remembering it more poorly than what I reviewed it initially. Does that make sense?
Sure.
I don't remember it fondly, but apparently I didn't piss on it whenever I watched it.
I think it was very much a not as bad as expected kind of thing.
Right. So ultimately, the worst film I watched in 2020 is Raised by Wolves. I mean, I'm sorry.
He's shitting on it again. He can't help himself.
It's Eurovision. Eurovision, I think,
Okay.
is the worst movie I watched.
The story of Fire Saga, yeah?
It's just fucking... I didn't enjoy that movie.
Yeah, ding dong.
I just don't...
Fair enough.
I'm not quite sure why I didn't enjoy it. I think you enjoyed it more than I enjoyed it, if I remember correctly.
I think, yeah. I mean, it's not in my running for the worst film.
What's your worst film?
Well, so I had 3 in contention. The most recent one was Wonder Woman 1984 because it was rough. But there were fleeting moments of good such that I couldn't quite say it was the worst. I thought about Sonic because I also thought it was quite bad, but then I look back fondly on Jim Carrey just fucking hamming it up, and that brings me joy. And so the only movie that did not spark any joy in this one was Bloodshot. Last movie I saw in fucking theaters before the pandemic shut things down for good. Well,
it's going to be a shit year when your last movie's Bloodshot.
Oof. It's bad. It's see, the thing is, like I said, Wonder Woman, there's moments of good. Sonic, there's, hamminess that kind of makes it a little bit enjoyable, and also it's relatively short. Bloodshot's just a joyless, self-serious movie with Vin Diesel just being terrible in it. And wonky CGI and just dumb shit. It's not the worst movie I've ever seen. Compared to previous iterations of this where we've gone into the Hellboys and the Wrinkle in Times, it's not that at all.
God, those were bad fucking movies.
Those were borderline unwatchable. Bloodshot was just exactly what it looked like it was going to be, an early 2000s superhero movie that was somehow delayed until 2020. That's exactly what it was. It was, that sort of schlocky crap, which is to say that it wasn't good, but which is to say that it wasn't the worst thing ever, but by default, it almost had to be kind of the worst thing here, just because, there just wasn't enough else stuff that came out that really was crushingly bad. There are probably worse films that came out. They're just worse. of what I watched. It kind of just ended up being it.
So Eurovision, when you watch a comedy film and nothing really lands with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a tough watch. It's just dead silence. It's just awkward. It's just it's cringy. It's cringy.
That was Eurovision. So
I think I liked the songs and the kind of Eurovision was a weird movie, like for me, because it absolutely was not a funny film, and I felt all of that. I think that you're describing of this is a comedy that's not funny. Oof, very much that. But I still enjoyed the rest of it, and like Rachel McAdams was charming enough that I was just like, this is fine. This is not. I will not be mentioning Eurovision from here on out. Spoilers for the rest of this episode, but like it was fine. It was fine for me, I guess. So. But I understand it. Like, I mean, I think if a comedy is not funny, what is it offering you? I think is certainly a valid point to make. So yeah, I get it. Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's the worst film. Worst films: Eurovision and Bloodshot. Remember, once upon a time, we were going to cover Bloodshot and have a grand old time doing it, and then lucky bastard Andrew says, "Oh, theaters are closed. I guess I can't see it anymore. Should I pay $20 for it on video on demand?" I'm like, no, absolutely not. What are you doing? What are you talking?
Don't even consider it. Saved me on that one. I came in with the bigger save. Saved you from watching Raised by Wolves. That was like a fucking 12-hour investment worth of time.
It all balances out. Sure. So moving on to the most disappointing film of 2020. I guess it'll be my turn to start here.
Yeah.
I wonder if we'll have a consensus pick here. One thing for me, slight note, this is not the movie I picked, but Promising Young Woman was a very promising film for about an hour and 20 minutes, and then it was not for me. And I found the ending of that movie crushingly disappointing, such that it almost feels like it took the whole film down a huge, huge way for me. But really, it's Wonder Woman 1984. For me, that's the most disappointing film, because I think Wonder Woman... I guess we probably don't have a consensus one because your expectations probably weren't terribly high for Wonder Woman. But
my expectations, I remember the marketing. So my most disappointing film is Wonder Woman.
Okay, so we do agree. All right, I'm going to take it all back.
And I think for most surprising and most disappointing, this plays into, because we talk about the way films are marketed. On this podcast frequently, or at least we used to before it was
when
just
marketing
all
was a
Netflix
thing.
dumps. Yeah. This goes to your marketing team. So you could say that Wonder Woman is the best marketed film for 2020 because it is the most disappointing film. They took the best things of Wonder Woman, 1984 or whatever it is. What is?
Yeah, 1984.
Okay.
Yeah.
They took the best things of Wonder Woman and made an excellent series of trailers for that movie.
Yeah, stylish and and
funny,
and music,
and cool,
and the posters too. The posters were so colorful and vibrant and like neon inspired, and it was just fucking the vibe just felt so cool, and that was just totally absent from the movie.
Yeah, it was. Some of the stuff was in there, but it was schlocky, like the mall sequence. That's
true. We saw hints and pieces of that, and then it was just like, oh, this is just pure cringe, and the actual movie itself.
Right. Yeah. And then the whole, you cast, you cast Justin Timberlake in the movie, and
Yeah, the Mandalorian, Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, that's
AKA
it.
Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, you cast him, and you're like, oh god, I bet that's gonna be great. I wonder what villain he's playing. I wonder all this, and he's just slave to a fucking genie lamp or whatever the fuck. The wishing stone or whatever it is. Yeah. It was just really shitty. It was incredibly shitty. We shit on Wonder Woman. To be fair, if you want to hear us shit on it for 2.5 hours or
quite
whatever
a while,
it is,
I believe Anna joined us to shit on it as well. And so this cat. Yeah, you're right. disappointing and surprising are kind of the same metric for how they are. They're just kind of the other side of the coin from one another. It's expectations versus reality. And Wonder Woman, the marketing set those expectations fairly high. I think for both of us, and I think for Anna, I think as she probably expressed on that episode, Wonder Woman's her favorite comic book character, or at least minimally her favorite DC character, probably in general too, and the first movie, I think we liked it more than you. You'd seen it just the once, I think, in theaters. I think that first Wonder Woman film is legitimately very good with some third act woes that we talked about. So I was thinking they brought back the team that worked really well on this first one. Chris Pine's coming back somehow, whatever. We'll hand wave that for now and figure out how they deal with that. They did not deal with it well, needless to say. But it seemed like all the pieces were there, like a cool 1980s setting, with a colorful vibe and fucking Blue Monday, cool ass remix and a trailer. It all seemed very cool and set up to be something very, very interesting. Pedro Pascal and Kristen Wiig coming in too, and then it was just messy garbage and just dumb. The story itself was just incredibly fucking stupid. It was just really insultingly stupid. And Pedro Pascal was just hamming it up, and Kristen Wiig was she was good, but her character, what even happened there? Chris Pine, enough said there. Although he was good for what he was asked to do, I suppose. And Gal was just not as good. I think just the character was written in a way that didn't play to her strengths. Give me your power!
Yo, Pedro!
Take your life force!
Yo, Pedro, dance on that blue light right there. Fucking... What the hell?
It's just there were moments that I liked in it. Look, you can listen to our whole episode. I'm just hitting the same points that I already hit.
You really enjoyed the boy running off out of the forest, right? Looking for his dad?
Daddy!
Oh, fuck.
I ran out to the White House grounds. No one got me. This is what I wished for, is that I could run across Washington, D.C. to pop up in this forest for you.
Papa! That would be the only better thing, is if he called him Papa when he ran across the forest. Papa!
It is just such an unmitigated disaster of a movie, and it
so
just
bad.
Just begs the question of how the fuck did that happen? I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that, but I can tell you that it was
watches it in the editing room and
film.
says these are good choices and we don't need to have a reshoot?
And who says that when they have an extra fucking 6 months to work on it? This thing was supposed to come out in June or whenever the fuck, July maybe. No, I think it was June. And they sat on it until December and then put it out on Christmas Day and said, "Here,
who makes the
Merry
call
Christmas, you fucks."
for the IMAX sequence to be the Christmas scene at the end of the movie?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
These are our resources, and this is how we want to use them.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, most disappointing film. Go listen to our episode. Otherwise, we'll also talk about this one for a while, much like Raised by Wolves. Most surprising film. Like I said, the other side of the coin, expectations versus reality, where the reality surpassed the expectations.
Okay.
What'd you come up with?
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Fair enough.
We had
came a long way from that real fuck design that we got in that first trailer.
You had the signage with Sonic's legs being 14 foot long. You had the busted up looking fox being Tails. Remember that? And I
reconnaissance.
He got Jim Carrey absolutely losing his mind. And I was pleasantly surprised with Sonic. The bar was set so incredibly fucking low. And I walked away. Yeah, I laughed a little bit, had a good time with it, and it wasn't terrible. So
yeah,
I was surprised by Sonic the Hedgehog.
I was not as high on Sonic, but no, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that the internet contributed to what the internet drove a redesign of Sonic the Hedgehog.
And it bettered that film.
It did.
That movie would have been unwatchable with that original design in place.
Yes, it would have. It would have been
a fucking nightmare to watch.
Yeah, it would have. So, yeah, I was surprised by it. So, I don't know. What do you got for most surprising film?
Well, like I said, I was not as high on Sonic, so it did not win this award for me. I had two contenders for this. Extraction was one of them, actually, because I thought it was just going to be a generic action movie coming out on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
And
with what's his face with Thor.
With Chris Hemsworth, yeah. And it kind of ended up being a little bit more than that. I mean, it was a very bog standard story, what I expected that to be. But the way the action was shot particularly was really well done. And a lot of inventive kind of camera techniques, and it was just like good. And Chris Hemsworth beating the shit out of some kids, at one point. So it was, it was just entertaining. It was way more entertaining than I thought I was going to be. So it did kind of surprise me in that way. But I think the film that really did surprise me in a big way was Onward, because
that was a runner-up for me, right?
That is another marketing one, but the flip side of Wonder Woman, where the marketing was just fucking terrible. It looks real bad. It looked like a huge misfire for Pixar, and I think the end result is certainly not the best Pixar film that we got this year, but was a pretty good film. A good film in its own right. I think that did work kind of on its own merits. The DreamWorks-esque designs did not end up bothering me, and I think that the story of kind of two brothers and the magic in this world, like it all kind of actually worked pretty well. So I was very pleasantly surprised with Onward. So yeah,
the reason I thought about that movie for my pick, and the reason I didn't pick it is because the trailers of that movie left me with not. I never thought that movie was just going to be an unwatchable piece of shit like I thought Sonic was.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? The bar was never
the expectations were far more down the toilet to begin with.
Exactly.
So that's fair.
So that's why I didn't pick that. But it was definitely a movie that I was thoroughly surprised by, and I actually entertained the thought of picking it. But that was my logic for picking Sonic. I thought Sonic was going to be unwatchable. So, yeah.
Well, hot on the heels of me picking Onward, we move on to Best Animated Film. Is it my turn? I think it's my turn.
It's your turn, yeah.
To kick things off. All right. I did not pick Onward for this. The only other film, well, there's two films that I thought about really for this. Weathering with You, I saw in January. It's been a long time since I saw it. That was the next film from Your Name's director, Makoto Shinkai, which I enjoyed. I recall enjoying, but I recall it not being as profoundly moving as Your Name was, which obviously that's certainly a bar to clear that is unfair to hold against a movie. But it just didn't hit me in the way that I think I hoped it would, while it's still being very good and worthy of consideration. But the movie that did, especially on its second viewing, hit me in that emotional sort of way was Soul, Pixar's other offering this, well, not this year, but last year in 2020. And so Pixar's Soul was my best animated film of the year. There are other aspects of it, I think, that stood out in a huge, huge way. But I think the voice cast was very good, and just the design of it, the animation style. We talked about the lighting, I think, particularly in the Earth-based sequences. It all kind of came together, and the story beats just really, really packed, I think, a pretty big emotional punch, through this story of Joe Gardner. I think especially the kind of moments of self-realization that he has, I think maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the movie, just really kind of, it's an adult film, that's a Pixar film, but it to me, it felt like it dealt with a lot of emotions that I think are going to be lost on kids, even if there is shiny things and funny things for kids to still enjoy the movie. It really felt like a very adult film for Pixar, and so it kind of hit those emotional depths in a huge, huge way. I think overall that for me just made it stand out as the best animated film that I saw. My favorite animated film of this year is hands down Soul. Mm-hmm. Soul was the perfect, and it transcends the genre of animated film. Soul was the best film at the best time for the best reasons. Sure, yeah.
Soul was a profound movie in in and of its own right? Like, I mean, it was fantastically animated. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful movie. The art direction was incredible. The score was cool. The sound design was cool. The voice acting was great. It was humorous. It was touching, but it like I said, the timing of this movie couldn't have come out at a better time. Whole world's in a tough spot, and then you get something like Soul, and it left a serious impact on me. I've recommended it to everybody, and a lot of people just say, I wasn't able to finish it, and I've recommended it to 2 people now that I know that said that, which is kind of heartbreaking. Like, I don't like. How is it missing the? How is it not hitting the mark with you? Like, it just, fuck
right.
It brought me to tears twice. You know what I mean? Like, it just, it's such a good movie. Incredible movie. And it happens to be animated, so it fits the slot perfect. So, yeah.
Well, another consensus pick from Watch Review Repeat. All right. Here's an interesting one, a big one. We're inventing a new category, probably exclusively for this year, but we'll see. Wasn't really sure how to phrase it, but I went with best film that's not really a film. And we're also going to call this the Hamilton Award. We are giving Hamilton the Hamilton Award in 2020 because we didn't quite know how to handle the filmed version of Hamilton that was put on Disney Plus so graciously, I believe, on Independence Day, if I'm not mistaken. Hamilton is fucking amazing. Like, I think if we considered it a film, it's probably number one. I think it's at least in the top 5, minimally speaking. I imagine for both of us.
And it takes a good chunk of these awards away from films that are films.
And that's the problem, is like all the songs stuff, just, if they were talking about songs like Hamilton. Honestly, acting awards, like, you could be talking about Lin-Manuel Miranda, you could be talking about Leslie Odom Jr., Daveed Diggs, Philippa Sue, Renee Elise Goldsberry. Like, everyone in that cast was awesome. Like, just really, so good. And the experience of watching Hamilton for the first time, absolutely, I think for the both of us, lived up to the hype of hearing about it for so long. And I think we both experienced it as people that had not listened to the soundtrack endlessly without seeing it or anything like that. And it has been a mainstay for me. I've listened to the soundtrack many times since watching it. I think I've seen it 3 times now, if I'm not mistaken. And I always kind of, in the back of my mind, I have a hankering to watch it again. I'm like,
I thought I was alone.
it's 3 hours I got to carve out, so that'll be tough. But like, I just want to watch it again.
Like,
and I almost thought about watching it again before this episode.
I'll be scrolling.
I gotta watch a bunch of other shit.
I'll be scrolling through, like searching for something to watch. It's like, fuck, God damn it, I just want to watch Hamilton.
I'll just watch Hamilton again, yeah. Yeah, why not?
What an absolutely incredible production Hamilton is. Hamilton has taught me so... Hamilton's... And this is going to sound really bad, but I can blame Florida education, to be fair. But Hamilton has taught me so much of our nation's history. Hamilton's taught me... the appreciation I have for certain aspects of our government. Hamilton has taught me about George Washington. Hamilton's taught me so much. So much of what I currently appreciate is because of one production. The music is absolutely incredible. The acting's ridiculously good. I have never in my life seen anything like Hamilton. And it is hands down one of my favorite things, period. Hamilton is absolutely fucking incredible.
I don't think it's a ridiculous claim to say that 2020 was an infinitely better year because we got to experience Hamilton. Like, think about this. If I'm not saying that it's worth the trade or anything like that, but the mere fact of COVID-19 pandemic wreaking as much havoc prompted Disney to move Hamilton from a theatrical release in 2021, I believe in August of 2021, to a full year plus earlier to put it on Disney Plus, free of charge, no premium access bullshit, in July of 2020. Like, when people were in desperate need of fucking anything to latch onto, like, Hamilton came at a perfect
Hamilton.
time.
Fucking
Like,
Disney.
Like, and you know, and it's a really well done filmed version of the original musical with the original cast, you know, and you know, who I forgot to mention, of course, is Jonathan Groff's King George. The King George character alone brought me so much joy in 2020 that I can't, you know.
You'll be back.
Just send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da, 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 you know.
It's fucking incredible. It's so good. Like, I would be tempted, like, if we were recording this at 2:00 in the afternoon, hey, why don't we revisit this after we watch Hamilton?
Why don't we just press pause on the recording? We'll come back in 3 hours and
Fuck. What a show. Not what a show. I mean, you got to call it what it is.
It is a show. It's a show. It's a film. I mean, who knows? We can't figure out what it is. Therefore, we've invented a category for it. So
to prevent us from saying best
Hamilton
original
for everything.
screenplay, Hamilton, best production design, Hamilton, best director, all the things Hamilton, we just kind of lumped it up into one thing. So
it's worthy of recognition, and I think that kind of compartmentalizing it because of kind of the weirdness of it, you know, of what it is and defining what it is, I think it still gets the point across very much of, if you have not watched Hamilton, it is still on Disney Plus, you know, like, it's there for the taking. Like, you owe it to yourself to watch this because believe the hype, really. I mean,
it's,
you know,
it's incredible.
I was excited for it. I was very excited for it, but it blew me away all the same. So yeah. Hamilton, check it out. And now we go back to our regularly scheduled programming to talk about the other things, the non-Hamilton things in this world. Best original score. I think Hamilton will punt on who takes that first. So I'll hand this off to you. Best original score. What do you have?
Okay, so I can't give my boy any sort of recognition for The Mandalorian. So we will, but I can give it to him in Tenet. So Tenet is the best original score by Ludwig. Fuck's his name?
Ludwig Göransson.
Ludwig Göransson. Man.
It's not a consolation prize either. It's not. We can't give him for The Mandalorian, so we have to give him for the other thing that he qualifies for. Tenet had a fucking bomb score.
Yes, Tenet had a bomb score, so much and so that to the detriment of a lot of people, we couldn't. Some folks could not hear dialogue, and so the movie got shit on for sound design because we just want to hear that fucking bass, Ludwig. Just let it pump. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, dude, I get pumped up just sitting here thinking about it. What a score. What a score that defined. I think I say it every year. When a score can, when you can hear a score and you know what's going on in the movie and you're not watching the movie, or when you can hear a score and expect what you expect to see on screen is happening on screen, when it defines the given actions on screen, I think you have an incredible score. And Ludwig's score in this movie is absolutely just it's just punching. I don't know how to say it.
Punching's good. I think punching's good. I mean, it's
it's a visceral score. You know, just, I mean, you pump up, you turn up your speakers, if you got some good subwoofers in your system, like I'm part of this Facebook group called SBS Manufactures Subwoofers. I don't own an SBS sub because they're just pretty pricey. But there's videos that these people put, they have Tenet playing on their thing, and they go and they zoom in on their subwoofers, and those subwoofers are just moving like it looks like feet out of the enclosure of the subwoofer box. I mean, it's just pushing air. They're just, man, what a really cool score. Now, I would have said I would have given it to Queen Gambit's up there. It's a completely different vibe, but it's also a television show, so it was easy to kind of push it out. But I immediately gravitated towards Tenet. Ludwig is he's an up and coming Hans Zimmer or God damn, I feel bad about myself. John Williams. He's just if he was a director, I'd say he was an auteur. Like you can immediately recognize his signature on sound when you hear his stuff. Really talented dude, putting out a lot of really good stuff right now. And I don't own the Tenet score, but I would like to own the Tenet score on an album. To complement the Mandalorian album that I have from season 1. Real cool stuff. What do you got for score?
So I also picked Ludwig Göransson's score on Tenet.
Nice, okay.
And what I would say about it is, I think the sound mixing woes are things I've talked about, with that film on multiple occasions. But I do think that the film itself would be vastly inferior without the score that
absolutely
Ludwig Göransson brought to the table. Like, it's the driving force. So even if I'm struggling to hear, like, what did he fucking say? What? Take the mask off. I can't hear you. Like that sort of thing. Like, despite my frustrations with that, which I think were largely resolved with subtitles and watching it in a proper sound environment, the score was still the through line through all of that. Whether at a drive-in, as I watched it the first time, or whether watching it in 4K at home on my, home theater setup, like, the score was just fucking awesome, and it's intense at times, and just, I don't know how to really describe the score, because it doesn't feel like anything I've ever heard before, and I think that's unique.
It's the ambiance of the whole, like, you have a sci-fi, it sets the ambiance for the whole movie. It
does, in a big way, and I think even from that opening sequence, like, the score sets the mood and the tempo of that film, and is such, and I think a huge way that, I think a lot of times scores can just get buried underneath whatever movie they're in. Like, you may not think about it too much, whereas when I think about Tenet, one of the first things that comes to mind is thinking about the score. Like, the score is intrinsically linked with the experience of watching that film. And I think that speaks to the credit of that score. So that's why I picked Tenet. I would be remiss if I didn't also shout out the work of the score on Soul, which I think is another film that...
Yeah, it was good.
It was two different scores almost kind of mashed into one. You had the jazzy stuff from John Batiste, and then you had the industrial Great Before stuff from fucking Nine Inch Nails. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross working on a Pixar film. Still wild. But and it's almost like fits in their wheelhouse of like what they do as Nine Inch Nails in a sort of way. And it really fit the vibe of those particular sequences in the film in a really, really fun, cool way. Like it's such a wild pairing, but it's a pairing that makes total sense. And I think both kind of vibes of the Soul score really, really worked. They worked together because they made sense as these two kind of disparate things that were kind of in the same movie and the different kind of plot elements of the same movie, but they really worked. But like I said, I think just the way that the Tenet score linked up with the movie in such a huge way is why I ultimately decided on it as the winner. So yeah. Best original screenplay.
I'm next.
You're next? Okay.
I'm next.
So go take it away. Take it away.
So for best original screenplay, I give a shout out to First Cow.
Okay.
First,
you give it a shout out, as in it's not what you picked.
it's
or
not what I
this is your
picked,
shout out?
but it's a close runner-up. First Cow is very slow-moving. It's a very
Frontier.
Yeah. So, if you haven't seen it, you haven't seen it.
I have not seen it. No.
Okay, so First Cow is it's a very slow-moving, heartfelt drama movie set in the frontier of the western expanse of America. I think it takes place in like California, Oregon, or something like that. So it takes place on the Western Front. And it's just a tale about two people that come from two different, I guess not two different walks of life, but kind of. But they find very good friendship, and it's just it's just a really heartfelt movie. It's very good. Very, very good. A lot of technical things go into it, I think. I think it's a technical film. I would imagine that because of its pacing, a lot of people might lose interest in it. But I think if they just invest the time in it and they just kind of dwell in what the movie's presenting, I think that it's easy to really get into it. I got into it. I didn't finish it in one viewing, but I was definitely invested. I thought it was a very good movie. But my best original screenplay goes to The Trial of the Chicago 7. It was written, that's Sorkin. Aaron Sorkin?
It's Aaron Sorkin, yeah.
The dialogue was incredibly snappy and witty, and I found it incredibly interesting. It's grounded in real life events. I think a lot of the trial stuff composed like a large percentage of the dialogue in the movie, which is really cool. And I just the way the banter between the characters is written in such a way. I never watched The West Wing, I think is what he was attached to. I never watched any of that, so I mean, I think this might be like my first real exposure to him. But what a talented dude that guy is. This is it's written by him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, written and directed. Yeah.
Yeah, real good screenplay. Super, super, super solid.
So, I have two notes, and the one thing I'll note is that technically, First Cow is based off a book.
Oh
so
shit! Okay, good thing it's not
screenplay.
In there. Okay.
So I don't know if you need to make a last minute change, and if that changes how you assess best adapted screenplay. But I'm giving you the opportunity to do it while I
First Cow's based off a book. Goddamn, I bet that's a good book.
No, maybe, I don't know. I've read it, so
it would be like a book like what's the one with the guy that goes in the Great Depression and he's got his buddy and his buddy ends up tearing that woman's dress and so he ends up having to put him down in the woods. Of Mice and Men, is that what it's called?
Yes.
I would imagine it would be that kind of narrative. Like it would be that kind of just kind of slow, deliberate kind of book. Yeah. Anyways, so I didn't know that.
Anyway, I'm throwing it out there in case it changes your calculus at all. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. That's up to you. But I will agree with you. The Trial of the Chicago 7 was my favorite kind of screenplay from this year. And I'm a huge fan of Aaron Sorkin's work. Now, having experienced the entirety of The West Wing that he worked on, which is the first 4 seasons, he was not involved in the last 3 seasons of it. But the Trial of the Chicago 7 particularly, I think almost feels like his strongest writing work. I've liked pretty much all the other movies that he's written that I've seen, which is Moneyball.
Never saw it.
Few Good Men.
I did see that. That was a good movie. Fuck, he wrote that movie?
Yeah, and The Social Network. The Social Network is also an incredible.
Yeah, okay. Well, then I guess
film.
That's not my first exposure. He's a really talented dude.
But just a really talented writer. And this one I know took a lot of chunks from the actual trial transcript, but he it felt seamless in everything in the movie. It never felt like this was written by someone else, or like it all felt very authentic to it. And really, the movie really was fundamentally just the trial. I mean, it was almost exclusively a courtroom drama, and outside of the courtroom, like it all just flowed so well. The dialogue, and it was hard hitting. It was snappy. It was witty. I think the words you used, or at least some of the words you used. Man, it was just an enjoyable film from start to finish to just watch unfold.
In this movie,
frustrating, in some ways because of the characters, right? But
in this movie, I have recommended to multiple people, and unlike Soul, despite what their feelings are about the movie, they say they watched it and they enjoyed it. They have qualms with the way it was edited, with the way that I guess the story was told, is what I've been told by two people. But overall, they enjoyed it. So,
I gotcha.
Just gratifying. It's nice to give a recommendation that it's nice when I'm high on a movie and you tell somebody about it and they come back and they say, "Oh, I don't like that, but I thought it was a pretty good movie." It's better than what I got from Soul, which is incredibly disappointing. The people I'm talking to about movies didn't like fucking Soul. But anyways, I continue forward.
My runner-up was Mank, which was written by Jack Fincher, who is David Fincher's father. I think it's a really good film, and I think it's a really good screenplay, but I think the story behind it is super fascinating too. Jack wrote it in the 1990s. David Fincher was going to make it as one of his first few films. Like, he was going to start making it after The Game, which came out in 1997. And
I didn't know that was
happened.
A Fincher movie.
And his dad died in 2003. So the guy that wrote this movie died almost 2 decades ago.
Who is the father of the director?
Who's the father of David Fincher, who ended up directing it eventually. And I just find that's super fascinating. Like, I don't know if he tinkered with the script at all. I mean, the only credited writer is Jack Fincher, so I'm not sure, if what the final product was just a filmed kind of version of the thing that his dad made. But I just think that's super fascinating. It's not the first. This is not the last time we'll talk about Mank, so I'll save some of my thoughts for kind of about the film itself. But I think I'll say that the screenplay very much informs the other aspects of what I liked about it. I'll leave it at that for now. So that was my runner-up. It will come up again. Mank will come up again. Spoilers. Best adapted screenplay. I guess I'll start here.
Yeah, you kick this one off.
I was between two. Thought about Ma Rainey's Black Bottom because I felt like that was very clearly a play, and it translated to a pretty good film, an enjoyable film, obviously with some standout performances in it. But I think the reason I didn't pick it is because it still felt like a play to me. Like I don't know what the original play is like, and I don't know how much I don't know how different it is. But to me, it didn't feel like they transformed it into being a film necessarily.
It very much felt like a play. Yeah,
it kind of felt like a filmed version of a play. And to
Good
me,
point.
I kind of think of adaptations. Like, obviously, you're taking one medium and putting it into a different medium, and I think they did a good job of just keeping the same feel of it. But I picked something else because it took something that I think was very fundamentally different and modernized it in a big way. And so what I picked is The Invisible Man, screenplay by Lee Whannell.
Good pick. Yeah, good call.
Taking a novel written hundreds of years ago, I guess at this point, I think it was an 1800s novel. Not hundreds, I guess over 100 years ago. I guess theoretically would probably be the best way to do it. But 1897, yeah, written over 100 years ago. Putting that into a modern day setting and focusing on, like gaslighting really being kind of like almost like the central crux of the narrative of, it's taking the conceit of the Invisible Man and imbuing that with technology as the basis for its existence and hitting on,
that was a really good call. Yeah.
Just hitting on a lot of things that like clearly that novel was not intended to capture with its story, but taking kind of the central conceit of an invisible man. What does that mean? What does he do? And putting that into a modern day setting with an abusive relationship and centering around this character that Elizabeth Moss portrays. I don't know. Just something about it was really fucking good. It stood out for me, and I focus on the transformative aspect of it, in the sense that like. This this probably barely resembles the H.G. Wells novel, but it's still very much The Invisible Man, I guess is what I would say. So that's my kind of pick for adapted screenplay. And now it's your turn. What do you have for adapted screenplay?
So for adapted screenplay, I have The Devil All the Time.
Okay. All right.
I thought The Devil All the Time. It felt like I found out later on that it was a novel. I think I found out when we covered it in the episode. Or before that. I don't know quite when I found out it was a novel. It felt like a novel. Mm-hmm. But I thought it was carried to film very well. It was a hard-hitting movie at a hard-hitting time. It was very dour. And sometimes I like to sulk in dourness when I'm surrounded by dourness. It's nice to just fucking...
Just embrace it.
Yeah, just fucking wallow in it, you know what I mean? Just roll around in it and absorb it and all that good stuff. So, thought The Devil All the Time on its own merits was a very good movie. And I thought that the screenplay definitely elevated the movie in a big way. Yeah, so I picked Devil All the Time. But I will say that your Invisible Man is an incredibly good pick. Like, that was outside of the box, and definitely a strong, like, could have changed my pick just based on yours, but like I said, I think you went outside of the box on that, and like I said, you deserve praise on that pick, because that's a good one.
Well, thank you. I don't think it's going to win any awards for it, but
it should. It should, though. Like you say, it's based over 100 years ago, and the premise of the movie was changed to modern times, or the scary things about the movie or whatever was changed to a current to make it topical. You know what I mean? And it was really strong pick. Good choice.
Yeah. It's one of the few pre-COVID.
It also feels like it happened 15 years ago.
It does, but it still stuck with me, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know, like, even though I very much did watch it a year ago, that's one of the few, I think, pre-pandemic movies that still kind of sat with me a little bit. So, yeah. Moving on. Best sound design.
Soul.
What do you have for best sound design? Soul. That's a good pick. Yeah.
Sure. Solely for the fly zapper, which is The Great Beyond. Says, "Oh fuck, no, I'm out of here."
He noped so hard he managed to break through the barrier and get back to this fucking weird side. Reality.
So,
where
solely for the fucking bug zapper. Soul. Period.
That was funny. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Well, I will circle back around for a brief moment to The Invisible Man, because I think it's another one worthy of recognition for its sound design. I think the way that the suit moved, and the tension of just being like, a lot of times it was probably shot with literally no one in the room and just being like, fuck, did that broom just move? Like little things like that. But I think when the character was around and there's like breathing or something like that, or like just that was a movie that like,
and it dwelled on silence,
it in theaters.
Too, that movie did.
Yeah. I'm glad we watched it in theaters, because I think if you watched it in a less than pristine environment, it wouldn't work as well. But I didn't pick it. I picked Sound of Metal. I don't know if you had a chance to watch it, unfortunately, before we recorded. Sound of Metal, maybe it's a little unfair, but it's a movie that I think wholly revolves, in a big way around its sound design, because it's about a drummer in a metal band who goes deaf. He starts going deaf, and he loses basically 75-80% of his hearing. And the movie very smartly uses its sound design to kind of replicate what that experience is like.
Oof.
And so it's really...
Do you get a lot of those? Like ringing ears, or is it just like multiple channels just go silent?
Yeah, it's more about like the silence just kind of being haunting. When people are talking and it transitions from either from being really quiet to them being normal talking, and just the jarring difference from that, or it's really less about the ringing in the ears or anything like that, and just the fact that you just can't hear things, and it's just very muffled sounding, and just
Oh wow.
I don't know. It's just it's a huge part of it, and I think it does a good job of kind of conveying like what that is like, because it starts like pretty normal, and like like the way it starts, it's very like a lot of the sounds of the environment kind of seep into it, like so it's almost Tenet-esque in the sense that like it's kind of hard to hear the dialogue a little bit. They're like driving an RV, and like the RV sounds are loud, and like the environmental sounds are loud, and like the dialogue's just kind of mixed in there. And so, but it makes it staggering when you lose all of that, when you're like in a scene where it's almost either just entirely silent, or someone is, and like, they're saying something, but you can't understand anything they're saying.
So it builds on the dynamics that it sets in the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I think so. I think it,
which is cool. That sounds cool.
And obviously it's a character. They I think they cleverly also use music as a way of kind of showing that too. Of there's a big drumming sequence in the beginning, and then the next time he plays drums, it's just kind of like a very muted kind of sound, and it just the difference is very stark. But it uses sound in a big way to, I think, from what I can understand, replicate the experience of losing hearing in a way, and certainly it's it's for a character who has had normal hearing all his life and then suddenly goes deaf. And
his career is based on his hearing. Like his whole person is music. Defined on hearing. Yeah. The fuck.
So the trauma of that I think is really well done. And I think the sound design is what makes the movie hit as hard as I think as it does. So I picked Sound of Metal for sound design. Like I said, sound is in the name, so you think they know what they're doing, and they did, fortunately. So yeah. Best editing. Is this me?
That's you. Yeah.
I think Tenet had a tall task to deal with the time bullshit. So it was a tempting pick for me. But I ultimately went with Mank on this one as well. Edited by Kirk Baxter, because it's a film I think that jumps back and forth between flashbacks and kind of present day, and I think it does it in a very cool and stylish way, and it does it in a way that mimics kind of the thing that it's about. So it's about Herman Mankiewicz, who is the screenwriter on Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane is like the first movie of its kind where there's like a frame story, and then it goes into flashbacks exploring the life of this one character, Charles Foster Kane, and Mank kind of does that with Mank himself, and so it takes the kind of format in a way of Citizen Kane and transposes that onto like the making of the film. In a way, it's not really about the making of the film, it's really about the writing of the film and the experiences of Mank throughout his life as a Hollywood screenwriter, and how that informed what he ultimately put into the screenplay for Citizen Kane. And I just think the way that it edited that did such a good job of kind of synchronizing those two movies in such a unique and cool way. And it made, I don't know, the whole experience of watching Mank, I think, was benefited from that, from the way that they kind of tied those two together. And I thought it was very well done. So I picked that for editing. What do you have?
So I picked Jennifer Lame for her editing prowess on a very complicated film.
Tenet?
Of Tenet.
Mm-hmm.
She nailed it, I think. I think a lot of the editing, I think a lot of the visual effects and stuff, I think that's probably going to be constituted in editing as well. The way things go forward and backwards and stuff like that. I think it might be, I might be talking out of term, and I might be talking because of my own ignorance. I don't know, but the way that I would see you doing what they did in Tenet would be done in the editing room. You know what I mean? When you want people to go forward, you want them to go backward, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So I think Tenet was very strongly edited. Yeah, so I picked Tenet. And it's a time travel movie. You got to figure out how to put those fucking pieces together in a way to where, even if it takes 9 viewings for you to understand what's going on, you have to put that shit together somehow,
I had trouble didn't have trouble seeing how it happened. It was just hearing, So.
Yeah. So, yeah, best editing goes to Tenet.
All right. Well, what does best visual effects go to?
Okay, so visual effects was complicated because you had Tenet.
Yeah.
But I didn't pick Tenet.
Okay. You went in a different direction.
I went in a different direction. I picked Soul.
All right.
Soul was ridiculously beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Definitely.
sands on How to Train a Dragon beach beautiful. Like, it was beautiful. And it wasn't like How to Train Your Dragon. The sand was like just... The sand was lifelike.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that this was lifelike, but it was almost lifelike. The lighting and just the visual effects of this movie were absolutely astoundingly beautiful. So I picked visual effects. We didn't have a lot of, in-game CG or anything like that this year.
I mean, all the big blockbusters basically vacated the year, so you really didn't have the same stock of like contenders, I think, for this category you would have in an ordinary year. And
I'm going towards a purely visual effect movie. I'm going to an animated movie for visual effects.
It's animated, right? Yeah, I mean,
so, but Soul set a new bar for animated films, I think. Especially with animated films it's one thing to take an animated film and try to make it lifelike. It's and it's another thing to understand that we're making an animated movie with caricatures of people or purely animated stuff like The Great Beyond, when you're dealing with conceptual designs and stuff.
Yeah.
And to make them beautiful. You know what I mean? I think it just did a really good job. I don't know how to put into words what I'm trying to say. I'm struggling, but
I feel you.
Yeah.
I feel it. So
okay, all right.
I feel it.
We're on the same page, I guess. What did you pick for visual effects?
So I did pick Tenet for this for visual effects. I was definitely going to make the comment of what are we picking from this year? Right? We're missing those big set PC based movies, and Tenet is probably kind of the lone survivor. I mean, I guess Wonder Woman came out, but I think the CGI alone disqualifies it. It's not in the conversation. Tenet, I think, did a really good job, and I know Nolan is a filmmaker who, loves to do things practically, and I think that practical visual effects are still part of visual effects. But I think this is also a movie that kind of had to rely on visual tricks and visual effects with the way that things played out, like the protagonist versus reverse protagonist. Like, there is absolutely CGI in that moment, you know what I mean, to make that sort of thing work, or to composite those shots maybe to make them work. I don't know how the fuck they did a lot of it. I would love to see how they did a lot of Tenet, but I know that what I saw was very impressive looking and never really looked fake to me or like out there or like wonk, you know what I mean? Like in the way that something like Wonder Woman, which is like that blockbustery CGI thing, and I'm like, well, that's fake. That looks bad. You know what I mean? Like right. Tenet never had that sort of moment. Like the blend of practical and CGI was pretty seamless, and I think that's important for winning this. So yeah, I mean, Tenet really impressed me with his visual effects, so I picked it.
Yeah.
Best production design.
So I went with a movie that you did not see.
Oh.
I went with The First Cow production design.
Okay.
I would have gone for Hamilton, I guess. I shouldn't even start that precedence moving forward. So we're
going to change everything that we've just said. Go back on it.
Wipe
we're
that.
Put every Hamilton actor into the supporting and best for all of them. No, it's fine.
The First Cow is set in Frontierland, and it relied heavily on without a good production design, you don't have this kind of movie. So I went with The First Cow. I mean, the way that they designed the sets, I I've said it too many times, but the visceral is probably not the right way. Just the muddy and the coarseness of what it was to be like. Sin Chronic is a movie that I watched, and it goes back to like Anthony Mackie. So I think Anthony Mackie, is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anthony Mackie says it very good in Sin Chronic. History sucks. Like, we're so incredibly blessed to be in the time that we're in, where we don't have to deal with this stuff that they were dealing with. Mm-hmm. But to be running around in like such a thick forest area, and like you want to go and sell your shit on the market, and you got to put it on a fucking rock to sell it, and in like a fucking mud puddle. You know, and just the way they designed the entire production, I guess. You know, it set a high bar. It was an impactful production design. Yeah. So yeah. Anyways, what do you got?
Well, I counter your film that I haven't seen with a film that you haven't seen. Mank? I counter you with Mank yet again. Yes,
I imagine Mank. I will say I imagine Mank being a very strong production design. I haven't seen it. God damn it! And I forgot about watching it, which is even shittier. I forgot about watching it, which is an insult to Mr. Fincher and Gary Oldman, because Gary Oldman's one of my favorite. But yeah. So what do you got? I'm sorry.
I mean, Mank is a film that's shot in black and white. You know, it's not a converted. It was shot in black and white. So I think inherently, when you do something like that, you have to design your sets to kind of, you know, to accommodate for that. You know, in this day and age, everyone's used to shooting in color. I think that requires very deliberate effort in terms of lighting, in terms of, you know, just everything, you know, and furnishing and stuff. And I think that it did a good job, you know, just recreating like an old Hollywood studio type set. But there's also a lot of sequences that take place in like a mansion type thing, which is like supposed to be like William Randolph Hearst's mansion. And I just think the way they shot all that was just really, really fascinating. And the frame story, I guess, if you will, kind of takes place in like I don't know, like not even like a ranch, but just like a kind of house in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, it all really kind of came together in a really, really satisfying way. And I think it was a huge part of like why the movie was as interesting as it was, is just how it was. And I was reading something basically saying that, you know, when they were trying to do it, they were trying to emulate Citizen Kane in a sort of way, you know, obviously, again, due to the nature of what the film's about, they were trying to make it feel like it had similar aesthetics to it, and I think that they succeeded. So yeah, production design I think was just really impressive. Oh, and costumes. The costumes are really great too. I guess we can kind of lump that in with production design. I think the costumes were really good and fit the vibe of the film and the vibe of the era really, really well. So yeah, I picked Mank. All right. We are winding down in terms of the technical awards, if you will. Best cinematography. I am going to keep the through line going and talk about the cinematography in Mank. Eric Messerschmidt was the cinematographer on Mank. Beautiful film. It really is just kind of a follow-on to what I just talked about, of shooting this in black and white and kind of having to, you know, shoot around that limitation, if you want to classify it as such, or just, you know, around that choice, you know, really, and making it feel like a kind of an older film of sorts. And I think that it was the perfect merging of older sensibilities with new technologies. You know what I mean? Of this is all very much an old styled film, but it's still shot with the you know, kind of the keen eye that you'd expect out of a David Fincher film, you know? So I was really impressed with the cinematography of it. There's a few shots and there's just a few like lingering shots in this film that like I think about and I think, man, it was just exquisitely shot. Just a beautiful fucking film. But I picked Mank. I picked Mank for cinematography. What did you pick?
Yeah, so I will say the cool thing about Mank, I read this about Mank, and god damn it, I wish I would have watched it. It was shot on a red camera. And it was shot on a red camera that does not take in any fucking color. It's strictly black and white.
Right.
And the most fascinating thing I thought about Mank was that a colored version of Mank does not exist.
Right.
There is no version of Mank to where you can. I'm sure you could probably like put an algorithm on it or something like that to where you can derive
there are
the
black
color.
and white films that they've colorized, but
Right.
That has attracted its people have not been a fan of when that's been done. Like like this movie was made this way. Like you can't just change it later on and think it's okay. But
and it's probably not. It's not going to be 100% accurate. A color version of Mank does not exist. I will say this. I will counter your pick with a movie that you have not seen.
Oh, we're just one up each
other. And I will continue my through line with First Fucking Cow.
Okay.
So I will say that First Cow was shot in 4:3.
Okay. Interesting.
Interesting. Right.
Okay.
A movie is serious when it's shot in 4:3. There is something they're going for when they don't take advantage of a wider aspect ratio.
Yeah.
So Mank, or not Mank, God damn it. First Cow is a beautiful movie. And Christopher Blauvelt is the cinematographer for that movie. He also worked with Mr. Fincher on The Game. Fun fact.
Okay.
But he also shot Emma, which I wanted to watch Emma and I never watched it.
I didn't see it either, so yeah.
He also worked on Speed, starring our favorite actor, Keanu Reeves. But nonetheless, this is a beautifully shot movie. It takes advantage of long shots. And it adds to the authenticity of the experience that they're going for, I think. Especially when you're talking about a long drama, and you just have these like there's the very first sequence you see in the First Cow is a shipping boat. Like it's got like a shipping container boat going across like through a river, right? And it just doesn't stop. It's probably like a 30-second thing of this boat just going through the canal. And it's almost like a Baraka kind of sequence where it's just like,
no wonder you picked it then.
Yeah, it when I'm a big fan when you can stop a movie on a frame and put that frame on your wall.
Yeah, it's just a fucking piece of art, basically.
Yeah.
Any given frame in this movie is a piece of art.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this, don't get me wrong, you probably can't take every frame of this movie and put it on your wall, but it's subtle. It's subtle in the way that it tells the story. The story's about friendship and dire situations, and they start this movie with this quote. I really wish I could remember exactly what it was, but it was something like a bird's home is a nest, a something else's home is this, and a man's home is friendship, is the way the movie starts out. It starts out with that quote from, I think it's like Robert Frost or something. And it just, the cinematography of the movie expands on the subtleness of these two people. You know what I mean? And the situation that they're in and everything else. And it's just it's a beautifully shot movie. It's not incredibly complex in nature. The lighting's really good. But just like I said, the angles and everything that it was composed of, it really, it's just a really beautiful movie to watch in its own kind of bleak way. So yeah, I don't know. I really appreciated the way it was shot. Really pretty movie. Another movie I really enjoyed, runner up, was Promising Young Woman. I thought that was a really good shot movie.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree with that.
But this is just, I think, a whole nother level of appreciation for what it is to be behind a camera. Because, like I say, you can take a lot of the images in this movie and a lot of the frames and just put them on your wall, depending on the kind of room you're going for. But yeah, pretty stuff, good stuff. So, yeah.
All right, that brings us to Best Director. Then, I
think it's my go.
I think it might be your go. What do you have for the listeners on Best Director?
I picked Aaron Sorkin for Trial of the Chicago 7.
Okay. All right.
I think Aaron Sorkin absolutely fucking nailed this movie. I think he knew what he wanted. He wrote it because he knew what he wanted, and I think he knew exactly where to put his people because he knew what he wanted. I think it was just an excellent direction for the movie to go in. It didn't feel like any one particular department was wandering. Felt like everybody was on point. He put everybody on a task, and everybody delivered on that task. I think it was an excellent production. I think Aaron Sorkin really nailed this movie. I think he's best director.
I can't. I was going to say I can't argue with that, although I guess I can because I didn't pick him. But I think it's a very good pick. I think Aaron Sorkin did a great job with that. You're going to
pick your boy, aren't you? You're going to pick your fucking boy.
You'd probably think that I would go with David Fincher on this for Mank, and you would be wise because he is my runner-up, but he is not who I ultimately picked for this. I am going to pull a different lever and go with the director of another film, which you did not see. I'm almost entirely confident to say.
Who directed Bloodshot?
It was not that person, whoever did that. I actually don't know the answer to that, and I truly honestly do not care to look it up at this point. I went with Steve McQueen, who directed a film called Mangrove, which is part of the Small Axe anthology film series on Amazon. It's the first of those.
Out of your pocket.
And this is one of the few I saw. It's not the most recent film. It's the third to most recent film that I've seen, but it blew me away in a huge, huge way. And the direction of it is what sold it. And it's interesting because it's actually very thematically similar in some ways to The Trial of Chicago 7. It's about basically a group of the Mangrove Nine who are put on trial in England. I mean, they're basically put on trial because they're black, is kind of ultimately what it boils down to. So it's different in terms of kind of the exact themes it's hitting on, and obviously the location, England versus America, is a little bit different, but it has very similar vibes in that the trial becomes a huge point of what the movie is about. But it's kind of a bit of both. The first half of the movie is kind of building up the idea of what the Mangrove is and who these people are that are living in this neighborhood in England, and then the second half is dealing with like a trial that relates to like a demonstration, like a protest basically that happens, that's born out of basically the harassment that these people are receiving at Mangrove, which is the name of a restaurant that the main character owns. And I was just blown away by this film. Steve McQueen is an incredible director. I haven't seen all of his films, but I have seen Shame. I saw Shame with Michael Fassbender a while back, and Widows I saw a couple years ago, which was very good. I think this is probably my favorite of any of his films that he's made. It just, I can always tell that he's been an incredibly capable and incredibly talented director. And this is the first time I think where like his filmmaking sensibilities merged with the story that was just super compelling for me. But particularly I'm talking about Best Director here. Just the way that it's shot, is such an intimate way of like exploring these people's lives. And then, and any moment's notice, basically, they'll get raided by the fucking, racist police. And it turns into a horror movie for a minute or two. And it's just shocking and violent and gripping. And then when it pivots to this movie about a trial, it's still pretty much compelling like Trial of Chicago 7 was. And so it's like almost like these two things that kind of came together in this movie in such a perfect way. And I think just the visual palette that this movie brings to the table, Steve McQueen was kind of the guy that made that happen. I was really, really impressed with Mangrove. So I picked Steve McQueen for Best Director. That does it for the technical awards. That brings us into the acting awards, and then we'll get into the big winners of the year. So let's start with Best Supporting Actor. I do believe we're going to have a consensus pick here, but I will go ahead and say on my behalf, minimally, that Sacha Baron Cohen for the Trial of the Chicago 7 was the best supporting actor this year, because his performance as Abbie Hoffman was lights out. I mean, fucking insane. Just a ridiculous performance, I think, that dominated a movie that is basically only, like, there's no lead actor, I feel like, in Trial of Chicago 7, but he almost is the de facto, lead actor because of how dominant that character is in that movie. And like, when I think about that movie, I think about Sacha Baron Cohen as Abbie Hoffman, just being the most, enrapturing part of that film, just hearing that character talk and his interactions, and, obviously like the gags and stuff during court, like, stand out too. But, I think it kind of, like, towards the end, it kind of, I think it kind of gives that trailer moment of, I didn't know I was on trial for my thoughts, or that's not exactly the dialogue. I'm sure I fucked it, but you know what I mean, I'm sure. And
yeah, absolutely.
Probably know what I mean. And like, it just like almost like cuts, like, cause it knows, like, you don't need anything more. Like, just sit with that for a fucking second, you dipshit. Like, that's what it feels like. And man, I sat with it, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, we agree. Sacha Baron Cohen absolutely fucking nailed it.
Yeah. He had a different role this year too in another movie, if you recall.
Yeah, absolutely fucking totally indifferent end of the spectrum. But it speaks volumes of his if you can go from you go from directing a movie like Borat to acting in a movie like this, this Sacha Cohen Baron, or God damn it, Sacha Baron Cohen is an incredibly smart fucking person.
Yeah, no,
I
think you need that. I mean, Ali G, Borat, Bruno, those larger than life caricatures of people don't work if you don't know what you're going for in the first place. Like, if you're just doing it to fuck with people, okay, fine.
That's one thing, but you have to know what you're satiring.
Like, like they're doing that to elicit something. They're targeting something. He's targeting people and doing that to elicit a very specific type of thing. And so, like,
people
he
lean
knows.
into it so naturally because they know he knows.
Yeah,
like he just knows how people are.
Yeah.
And so when you personify a person in historical history, Jesus Christ, I don't know how to talk. When you choose to personify a historical person, and I think it speaks volumes of Aaron Sorkin correctly. I'm sure he has a hand in who he picks for roles and casting and stuff.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes on Aaron Sorkin on picking him for the role, but eliciting the responses that you have within the courtroom drama from the judge, and how to act on those things that are like 90% based on historical fact and pulled directly from the transcript of the court. And you can make his interactions that aren't based in court feel so organic to the things that are based in grounded in real life. And it's just a complete understanding of the person that he was representing. And it's really inspiring. Like, it's ridiculous. So yeah, he absolutely nailed it. I would actually like to see him in a lot of different roles than what we've been.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciate Borat and Ollie G and, all the rest, but, really talented dude, and really appreciated him in this role. Like it completely changed the outlook of. I already knew he was a smart guy, but his acting prowess is remarkable. So yeah,
agreed. Well, pivoting to Best Supporting Actress, who did you land on?
So we're gonna have totally different ones here.
All right,
I imagine we are.
This movie is that why?
I don't know if you watched it or not.
Okay.
I picked somebody that I really enjoy watching. I think she's a fabulous actress.
All right.
I think it's the only thing I watched her in this year.
All right.
But I'm pretty sure I've given her an award every year since like the inception of our podcast.
All right.
Her name's Toni Collette.
Okay. She was
in a movie called I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Yeah, okay. I did not see it, so yes, okay.
And she played an incredibly like bonkers character.
Okay.
And she was very unsettling in her performance, as she can be. She's just a very, very talented woman, and I don't know. I picked her in that. So nice. I don't know. I had issues with picking somebody, so it's like default Toni Collette. She's always awesome.
She have her on standby. Hopefully, she never takes a year off from acting. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble. But or if God forbid she gets a lead role, what's she going to do? I guess Hereditary was kind of that, but I guess you talked about her and probably in that respect. But yeah. I thought about Amanda Seyfried because I think she was very good in Mank. She played kind of like an actress, like starlet kind of character who verbally spars with Mank on a couple occasions. And they had a very good chemistry and a very good dynamic that was fun to watch. But I had to. I actually think that this actress is getting a lot of awards recognition in a film that I think otherwise is not really. Someone who I had never seen perform before, who I don't know if she's ever acted before anyway, Maria Bakalova for Borat's subsequent movie film, Tutsar.
Okay, fair enough.
Borat's daughter. I mean, it was a clever thing to make Borat's daughter kind of the Borat-like character in this one because everyone knows Borat and no one's going to fall for that shit again. So Borat had to be in disguise, but she didn't have to be in disguise, She was great. I mean, obviously, she very much embraced that Sacha Baron Cohen thing of fucking with people. But I think this movie had more of a narrative thrust than the first one did. And I think that a lot of that hit pretty hard because she was great. Like, she really did feel like, this character from a editorialized, fucked up foreign country, in a way. And I thought she just nailed it. Like, it basically just being kind of that Borat replacement. Like, not anyone can just step in those shoes and like be effective in that type of role. But I think she did. I think she did that. I think she was great. And I have to assume that she's nothing like that character in real life. I don't know that for a fact, of course, but I just have to assume like this was her just leaning into kind of the wackiness and the zaniness of this character and pushing the buttons in a way that only a Borat-esque type character can. But yeah, she was really good. So yeah, Maria Bakalova. Like I said, I think she's getting some awards recognition, which is cool because I think it's deserved. For a pretty out there, intense role. I think overall for anyone really. So yeah,
that's a good pick.
Best actor. I think that there are quite a few contenders for this. I picked one, obviously. But I thought about Delroy Lindo, who I thought was very good in To Five Bloods. Movie we haven't really talked about a whole lot on this episode, which I think is a good movie. It kind of came out earlier in the year, so it's probably a little bit more forgotten at this point. But I thought he was very good, playing a complicated character, a black Trump supporter. It's kind of the weird sort of...
Oh, yeah, right, okay.
Like, huh? You know what I mean? But I thought it was very good. Very intense performance and a very well delivered performance. I thought about Riz Ahmed, who was in Sound of Metal. He's, a metal drummer who's going deaf. Like, that takes a lot, I think, to put into that role. And I think he did put a lot into that role. And he was very, very good. Very, very good. I thought about Sean Parks, who was the main character in Mangrove, who was the owner of the Mangrove restaurant, and he was really, really incredible. An actor I'm not familiar with, who really, really just delivered for me. But there could only be one, and the only one left is Chadwick Boseman, for his performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, because he just delivered in that role too, and he put everything that he had in him, in that role. We talked about it, obviously, when we talked about the movie on our last episode, highlighting Chadwick's performances and talking about his performance in Ma Rainey. But man, the things that he put into some of those scenes, I think there's a few sequences that I specifically highlighted when we talked about Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, talking about his parents, talking about, like the story of, God's relationship with black people, not in those words, and the stepping on the shoe, like those three sequences. I'm just like, Chadwick was just so good in these. And, there is obviously, of course, the nature of the fact that, like, that's the last Chadwick performance that we'll see, in front of the screen. And it makes it more, I think it almost makes it stand out more because of that. It's a little bit more accentuated because of that, but that doesn't mean that I'm giving it to him because, that's the last time we'll ever see him. I'm giving it to him because it was a really incredible performance, and it just hurts knowing that's the fact, that's the fact of it. So I picked Chadwick for this. I think he deserves it. I think he really does. So Chadwick for Ma Rainey's Black Bottoms, where I ended up for Best Actor.
So for Best Actor, I too also picked Chadwick Boseman.
Okay.
For Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. My runner-up was John Magaro from First Cow.
Okay.
But Chadwick's last, his when you I feel like when you add the caveat, when it's not even a caveat, but when you add in it's his last performance and like you take into account what he was going through as an actual person when he was delivering this performance in this last movie that he was in, it's awe-inspiring. But when you factor that out, you're still left with an incredible performance.
Yeah.
This is on the heels of doing the Chadwick Boseman episode, where a lot of the movies that he performed in, I wanted to give like a lot of the movies I hadn't seen. So I wanted to fucking pick them for these spots. I'm like, oh wait, this movie came out like 5 years ago, 8 years ago, or whatever it is. But for this to be the crescendo of his career, he definitely left a lasting impact. What he stood for as an actor, which is, I think, is he didn't play well. At least I can't say that for sure, but. The movies that we covered anyways, it seemed like he had a through point on what he wanted to be as an actor and what he wanted to cover. And, he's played an important role in history in general, but especially in film. What a dude. But this last performance in particular was incredibly potent. Just, man, what I can't. I mean, we talked about it, so you could probably refer to that if you want me to put it in real good words. But I don't even know if those were real good words too, because the by the end of the I don't know
some wine
how
had been
sloshed I was
consumed
by
at
the
that
end
point.
of the episode.
Yeah, sure.
So, but Chadwick Boseman absolutely nailed his performance in Ma Rainey. It did feel like a production. It felt like a play that was filmed, much like Hamilton. But like I said, the content matter of this of that movie and the way he delivered his character was outstanding. Like you said, there's a lot of people that were good, very, very compelling actors this year. But his performance definitely stood out above the rest. Even when you factor in that he was riddled with cancer at the end and everything else. I mean, it's really outstanding. I mean, he what a guy dedicated to his craft. Just absolutely nailed it. Yeah. Hats off to Chadwick Boseman. What a guy. He stood for a lot, and he's left an impact on film, and yeah, he's gonna go down in history for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, it leaves us with only one more acting award, and that is for Best Actress. So I yield to your decision on this front.
So I was gonna pick Viola Davis
for Ma Rainey as well.
But out of nowhere, and this was before you even mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I had Elizabeth Moss.
Okay.
For her role as the Invisible Man, for the same reasons you picked Invisible Man for adapted screenplay. For adapted screenplay. She took a concept of a horror film from a crazy invisible guy, and she played the role of a gaslit, fucking manipulated female person in a role, and just nailed it. Just what it is to be in her shoes was absolutely fucking terrifying. And heart-wrenching, and she made what it is to be a woman in that situation incredibly harrowing and believable, and I thought she did an excellent job of that role. Absolutely incredible. She's a really incredible actress, especially if you dive into Handmaid's Tale and stuff like that. I mean, she's very talented woman, and I think she nailed the role perfect. So
especially if you dive into Mad Men and stuff like that too. So
yeah. See, I don't know nothing about that, but you do. Who'd you pick?
I considered both Elizabeth Moss and Viola Davis. I think Elizabeth Moss was, from a movie that we saw in February. An amazing performance, haunting performance, and a pretty haunting film. She made that movie work, and with someone that is not as talented as her, that movie isn't as good. You know what I mean? I think I don't take away my adapted screenplay award or anything like that. I think it's still very strong, but Elizabeth Moss elevated what was already good, I think, on the written page and made it just so good. I mean, she really was the driving force of that movie. And, in a movie that I think didn't really have a lot of big name actors or anything like that, she really carried it in a big way, and I thought she was great. And I thought Viola Davis was great in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, playing this larger than life, figure, this musical icon. I thought she was great. A transformative role for her, I think, in a way, that she was. Like I said,
it was fucking hot wherever they were at.
It was fucking hot. We'll put it that way. That's for sure. Yeah. But she was very good. But I also considered two other people, and I ultimately landed elsewhere. Sydney Flanagan, in a movie I think you probably did not watch, called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. I think it's an incredible lead performance because she had never acted before, and it was her first time role in this film, which is about a teenage girl trying to get an abortion, and basically she lives in Pennsylvania, where she would only be able to do so with the consent of her parent, and she is not ready to kind of go that route. So she kind of goes on a trip to New York to get it done. And it's a subtle film in the sense that, there's a lot of plot elements that aren't laid bare. Like we don't know right away who the father is or anything like that. Like it's very much just like, oh shit, you're pregnant. What are you going to do now? You're 17, like that sort of thing. And it's kind of an understated role, I think, in some ways, but I think she really feels, she felt so authentic in that role, and it was just really, really good. And like I said, for someone who had never apparently acted before, I thought that was just really impressive. But who I picked, was Carey Mulligan for Promising Young Woman, which, despite my grievances with the film, my grievances were not with Carey Mulligan in that lead role, because I thought she was fucking awesome in that role. I mean, she, on a dime, could switch between, drunk, off her ass, to just menacing, like, I will fucking ruin your life kind of vibes, and I thought that was so perfect. That obviously what was the character was what designed to be, to be man's worst, enemy in a way. And I thought that was just really, really well done. Just the way that she could kind of shift between that. And I think also too, when we saw more of the genuine nature of her and interactions with Bo Burnham's character in that movie, like, I thought that was all just really well done. She just played so many different facets of this woman who has, in a way, indirectly and directly experienced a lot of trauma at the hands of men, and is, kind of basically leaving her stamp on the world by responding to that in kind. I thought she just imbued that role with so much that it was really impressive, and I felt bad for her by the end of the film, because the film really let her down with its ending. We don't need to talk about that in too many specifics. I think there's a lot of aspects of that ending that I think are just fucking ridiculous and just really held back the film in so many ways that is disappointing, because it's, like I said, 2/3, 3/4 of a really, really incredible film that would have made my top 10. It doesn't make my top 10 because the ending is so bad that they Game of Thrones it, is what I'm saying, is how I feel about it. So they Raised by Wolves it, I guess. Maybe I don't know. At least I don't
fuck,
know.
nowhere near, dude.
I don't know.
Nowhere near.
I don't know if that one started with
you
Promise,
pay
or if that
them.
was just bad, and
you
just
pay
got fucking way
Ridley
worse.
Scott such a service by even putting that in the same fucking realm. Like, it's not even fucking close.
All right, fair enough. I haven't seen it. They Game of Thrones did. I'll stick with that. All right. Very good, promising finish. Disappointing, fucking, just bad finish. But anyway, she was great. Carey Mulligan was great. There you go. So that's it. That's it for the acting awards. And we get into the showstoppers, the big ones, the ones worthy of recognition. I'm running out of descriptors at this point, but we have the opportunity to select honorable mentions. I think we've usually done up to 5 honorable mentions. I can flag already the fact that I definitely elected to use all 5 because I find it too hard to... Five is already hard enough to then, cabin it to just 5 and only have 6 or 7. I think it would be hard. So I like having the opportunity to have 10 films that I can recognize here. But I can ask you first of all, did you have some honorable mentions that you wanted to recognize?
So I have 4.
Yeah, 4. Okay, so you used most of your slots. Okay, fair enough.
I used most of my slots,
and you can go ahead and just list them off. We don't need to alternate here. You can just
no particular order. So I watched a movie called Synchronic by the guys that are going to be doing Moon Knight. I've watched a couple of movies by them. Synchronic was really cool. I think the cinematography was cool. I think the most interesting aspect of this movie, besides like the premise of this movie is there's an illicit street drug that allows people to interpret time differently. And the way that the way that it's described in the movie is synchronic is like the needle for a record player, and you put that needle on different portions of the record and you get a different portion of the song. And that's the way that the drug allows you to interpret time. Right. Which I thought was really cool. Definitely interesting perspective for like time travel and that sort of thing. It's just really, I think the coolest thing about this movie was, like, I've watched the directors in the writers, I guess, because I think they're like one and the same group of guys. I've watched them grow from like their earliest movie to to Synchronic.
Yeah.
And it's really cool to watch the progression of what they do as their budget grows. I think I texted this to you, but as they're given more resources to produce what they want to produce, they take it in interesting ways while still pulling on what made them cool directors to begin with, almost like a Sam Raimi. You know, like you have Evil Dead, which was innovative in its own right on how it was shot and how they did things. You have the same aspect with these guys, which is pretty cool. And then Possessor. Possessor was another one. Possessor was way the fuck out there, but I still thought it was a really, really cool movie. Palm Springs is another one. Palm Springs was a highlight in 2020. I couldn't really find a spot for it in any particular category given the other movies that I watched, but Palm Springs definitely served to be a release in times when you're not really laughing a lot during 2020, so I really appreciated that. I really appreciated the respawn aspect of it, almost like a live, die, repeat kind of situation. Like I said, I thought it was funny. I thought it was cool. I thought it was well done. Promising Young Woman was, much like you said, 2/3 of a very, very, very strong movie. The soundtrack was banging. I thought it was incredibly well shot. I thought it was very well acted. The performance between her and the dean of the school.
Yeah, Connie.
I thought was I thought that was a really, really, really strong scene. But all of the scenes, like when you present people with the dishonorable things that they've done and how they respond to that, I thought that was a very telling through line throughout the entire movie. And I thought that it was interesting that the most authentic response and the most heartfelt response was from the lawyer, which was the last person that you would expect to have that kind of response to the bad things that they've done. And I thought that, I really enjoyed the movie. The ending was, it was an ending.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's kind of like where I ended it. I think I feel confident with my top 5. I didn't have a whole lot of other runner-ups.
Okay.
There's good movies that happened this year, but like I said, it's kind of what I've got.
Well, very good then. So my honorable mentions. All right. Well, I did elect to do 5 honorable mentions. Like I said, I just couldn't help myself. Tenet is my first honorable mention. We had an episode on it, and I think I expressed my frustrations with it on the first viewing and liking it more on a second viewing while still not loving it, I think, overall. Still wanting a little bit more out of it, but, it just had a lot going for it, and I still enjoyed it. Even if it doesn't ascend into the upper echelon of like Nolan films or films this year or in 2020, it's still very well made, and there's a lot to just enjoy from it. And I just kind of found it to be still an enjoyable experience, such that I can recognize it for kind of the things that it did bring to the table. But yeah, I throw Tenet out there as kind of my first honorable mention. I echo another honorable mention that you picked in the form of Possessor, which I watched thanks to you. I watched it through your Amazon account, which you very graciously offered to me. Possessor, so I think when I talked about devs, I said there was a film counterpart of just a weird fucking bonkers out there type thing, and like I occasionally just like that, and for me, Possessor filled that kind of role this year. Possessor is an insane film. Just totally fucking whacked out film. And the funny thing is, there's an uncut version of this film, and the one that Amazon offers is not the uncut version of the film. It's there's barely, I think, much of a difference. I think there's only like a minute's worth of footage that's different. I think it's the way that it's edited that's a bit different in some ways, where the rated R version basically lingered on like reaction shots and stuff, whereas I think the uncut version has a lot more gore and stuff. Like, let's just say Sean Bean is in this film, and you can probably guess that Sean Bean does what Sean Bean does in any film that he's ever in. And so the manner in which that comes about is still pretty brutal in the rated R version, but it's apparently even more brutal in the uncut version. And I think there's more nudity. Like there's one sequence where like he's spying. Well, he's working for a company that's like has like they're like identifying the curtains, in a fucking porn thing. And I think that's a bit more explicit in the uncut version. Like little kind of things like that don't really fundamentally alter, I don't think, the movie in any sort of way, but make it just a little bit more explicit, I guess. Yeah, it was a weird fucking film, and I enjoyed it. I just liked the kind of setup of it, of possessing people to fill out like hits. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It was a cool, futuristic
cool
kind of
concept.
sci-fi vibes that I got from it. Good performances.
Unsettling.
Definitely a very unsettling film. The guy, the main guy in it, who's the one kind of being possessed, I think, for the majority of the film, he was really good, because that actor is kind of playing a dual role in a sort of way of, here's this guy when he's fighting against the possession, and then there's the full-on possessed version of him where it's, this guy, someone else is supposed to be in that body, like piloting that body, and like as an actor, like how do you deliver that sort of performance where like you're not yourself, like you feel like you're being puppeteered by someone. I just thought that was really interesting, and I thought just a very cool idea and a really well delivered performance. And then, by the end of it, it's all just super heinous and fucked up. And I don't know. I just liked kind of, like I said, I need that sort of weird out there kind of vibe every so often. I feel like Midsummer and like Hereditary have kind of hit that sort of mark for me in the past couple of years. And this isn't like exactly like a one-to-one thing. It's not an Ari Aster horror film or anything like that, but it was unsettling in the same ways, I think, or similar ways maybe. So not an outright horror film, like a sci-fi film, but it definitely had horror aspects. The mask sequence alone was very horror inspired.
Like I watched that movie when I was in the midst of my fevers. And it very much felt like a fucking straight up fever dream.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
a bonkers film. This is fucking bonkers film. But good. Now, in terms of kind of more straight horror-esque films, The Invisible Man is an honorable mention for me. I think I just really fucking liked that film. I thought it was just a really good send-up of,
that belongs. I guess if I'm going to populate number 5, that belongs.
Fill it
there.
out with that. All right, fair enough. Yeah, there's no rules. I mean, there are rules, but like, doesn't matter. We control them. We can do what we want. Throw it in there. Yeah, I really like The Invisible Man. I've been meaning to watch it again for the longest time because I think I got it for my birthday, actually. And I still haven't watched it since I've owned it, but it just really stuck with me. Like I said, one of the few pre-pandemic fucking everyone's lives ups. It stuck with me for kind of all the reasons that we've already talked about. But I just liked the angle that Lee Whannell took with it. Taking a low-budget approach to these universal horror films, very much a direct antithesis to The Mummy, bombing and failing, and like, let's just go fucking super under the radar with this shit and hire Lee Whannell to do a low-budget kind of take on this, and just to make it so thematically interesting and topical, and have a great performance from Elizabeth Moss, and have this technologically based take on The Invisible Man. I thought it all just worked so well. So yeah, I liked it. A movie I talked about just a little while ago, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. I'm putting as an honorable mention. This is the second to last movie that I've seen prior to recording this, and I just thought it was such an authentic take on what it's like in the United States for a teenage girl to try to have an abortion. I mean, it's a very polarized political environment. Abortion is a very, very touchy subject in this country, particularly. I'm someone that fervently believes in a woman's right to choose. And this shows that, just kind of the fucked up lengths that people will go to, because a lot of times abortions cannot be legally accessible depending on where you live. Like, it's luck of the draw. You might live you might live in New York where, like, it's a little bit easier to obtain. I mean, there's still, leaps that you kind of have to take to get there. But you know, she like ends up, she lives in like a fucking nowhere county in Pennsylvania, and she ends up going to like a clinic, which is clearly like a church affiliated one, and shows her an abortion is a murder video type thing. And it's just like, you know, the sort of shit that you see all the time. And, you know, it's just pretty gross that it's such a politicized issue. But I felt like the film was a very clinical, unflinching look at what it's like to go through that. And you know, and it's a film that, like, it almost feels like it is really more about like the experience of doing it. Like, it's not wholly concerned with like the mechanics of how she got pregnant and what that means for like her family or for,
you know
for,
what, because
for
it doesn't
sexual
fucking
partner and
matter.
stuff. But yeah, it's like, it's about her kind of journey to go through that. And, you know, she takes a trip to New York with her cousin who's kind of supporting her throughout it. And, you know, they go through hardships, you know, along the way of just roadblocks of just trying to get this done. You know, it's just, it's pretty heartbreaking in a lot of ways because it feels very authentic, I think, you know.
And it is an authentic thing.
I'm not a teenage girl, nor was I a teenage girl, you know, so I can't exactly say that I've, you know, been through an experience like that, but it felt so real, you know. It was one of those things where I could tell immediately this is directed by a woman. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a woman who's making this a semi-autobiographical thing or anything like that, but just the type of perspective that only certain people can lend. And I thought it was just good, you know, with basically unknown actors in it. It was really good. I think it just really hit the mark for me. It was very good. My last honorable mention is something that hurt me to cut out of my top 5, but I kind of did it out of necessity because I watched too many good things lately. Soul. I put Soul at number 6. Basically, this is the loose number 6. And I thought Soul was fantastic. I think the second time particularly is where it hit me more. But the art design, the score, the performances, the story beats, man, just really, really hard hitting, really emotional, and it's a really, really great film. And it, like I said, it hurt me to take it out of my top 5 because I thought for sure it was going to be in there, and then the more I weighed the kind of other things that I had watched recently, it got pushed out. It absolutely was in there, and it got pushed out. And I was like, if it's going to get pushed out, it's going to be number 6. So I'm labeling this number 6. So anyway, that is my final honorable mention. It's number 6, and I think that brings us to our top 5 films ranked in order of 2020. Why don't I kick it over to you for number 5?
So number 5 for me is Tenet.
Okay.
Tenet's a cool sci-fi movie. I didn't have the mixing problems that you experienced.
Right.
I didn't have a good... I recently took an old subwoofer and I put it back in the house, and I'm very tempted to rewatch the movie with proper bass. But aside from that, it was super. I thought it was an awesome movie. I really enjoyed it. It was thought invoking. I don't have to understand a movie wholeheartedly on my first viewing to thoroughly enjoy it. If anything, that makes me want to revisit it. And I thought it was really cool. Thought it was a really good movie. I wish I would have watched it in theaters. I don't appreciate Christopher Nolan having his head up his ass.
Sure.
But I know why he was advocating for people to watch it in that medium, because I don't think you would have the level of issues that you would have had if everybody watched it in that medium. I think it would have been much more positively received if everybody did watch it in that medium. I thought it was a really cool movie. So Tenet's number 5.
Okay.
What do you got for number 5? I'm curious. I'm curious what your ranking is for you to kick Soul out. What the fuck?
So my number 5, the movie that unfortunately said sayonara to Soul, kicked Soul to the curb, is Sound of Metal. Again, another one that I've talked about, on this episode already. Sound of Metal was just really good. And it was such a different film than I expected it to be. And I think that was kind of refreshing in its own way. It's a movie called Sound of Metal. I like metal, as a genre, and I kind of thought it was going to be very like a music heavy film. I knew that it was about a drummer going deaf, but I really thought the music was going to play a huge role in it, and it really didn't. Like, it was in the sense that like that was like how we knew the character to begin with, and like that's why it like hit so hard for this character to be going deaf. But it's not like the metal itself was like it's not like the metal was a character in the movie or anything like that. In fact, I'd say the metal that is played in the film is actually quite terrible. Is interestingly enough, like just the type of music is just horrendous. It's certainly not to my tastes, I'll say. But the rest of the movie is a very kind of illuminating piece on, I think of what it would be like, to experience your whole life, hearing things normally, and then for that to be kind of snatched from you very suddenly, and just how traumatizing and awful that could be. And I think it does a really just good job of portraying the horror of just like, I can't hear you, I can't hear anything, and just having to come to grips with that, and what sort of life changes that could mean, because he basically like goes to this like rural community for the deaf, to basically learn how to cope with this, until he can try to get cochlear implants to try to get his hearing back. And it's basically like him trying to, learn, he learns, to learn ASL, to kind of, be able to communicate in this very, very different way than he's accustomed to.
The whole nine yards, yeah.
And like what that means when, like his girlfriend, is someone who is, able of hearing, and like, I don't know, just the way that tests their relationship. And I don't know, it all felt very authentic, felt very heartfelt. And it is not an uplifting film. I would not say it's an uplifting film, but it's a deep film. It's a hard hitting film, and one that kind of sticks with you, I think, after you watch it. And I think that's a mark of a good film, is one that sticks with you. And then this one stuck with me, even though I only watched it less than a week ago. But I do think that it's one of those in the days since watching it, I thought about it. And I think that's a sign of things that are pretty good. So, unfortunately, as much as it hurt my heart, it replaced Soul at number 5, or even higher maybe. But this is the one, I think, because this was the most recent of no, it's the second most recent of my top 5. There's another one in my top 5 that's a recent watch that also.
Oh, we can only imagine what that's going to be.
So, I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, that's what I had at number 5. So you had 10 at number 5, which brings us to number 4.
Number 4 is The Devil All the Time.
Okay.
So The Devil All the Time was a well-shot, well-acted, dark, not very uplifting movie that a lot of people will definitely not like, I think.
But they'll like how Robert Pattinson sounds like this through the whole movie.
Yeah.
That doesn't even sound like
Robert
that.
Pattinson
I don't know what the hell he did, but what the fuck?
Was a tremendously huge piece of shit in this entire movie.
Yeah.
I think a large portion of the cast was a huge piece of shit in this entire movie.
Yeah.
But it spoke to me a lot about what it is to persevere through bad times to be the best person you can be. And just to stick to your guns on what you think is right, which I probably will, which certainly isn't right in this movie, probably.
Yeah.
But it's I just really like this movie. I really enjoyed the cast. Tom Holland nailed it. Robert Pattinson nailed it. I don't think you can speak ill about any of the cast.
No, yeah, very good performances across the board in this one. Yeah, I agree with that.
Cinematography was strong. The fucking storyboard was good. The way it was, I enjoyed the way it was edited. Slow paced, methodical, and just a tour de force kind of movie that did not want you leaving with really anything really fucking positive. But
I think that's why it. Well, spoilers for myself. This is nowhere to be found in my top 5. I didn't want to think about that movie like after I watched it. You know what I mean? Like it sat with me, I think, in like eminently, because I'm just like, Jesus Christ, you know, it's like an immediate response to that movie.
Rough movie.
But I was just like, I don't think I ever want to watch that movie again. I don't think I want to think about it again. And like, it was good, like it was well made, and like, but it was just so fucking dark and depressing. And like, at least Sound of Metal, I was just like, yeah, this is not an uplifting film, but it's not like a beat you over your fucking head kind of film, like in the way that The Devil All the Time was, which it's called The Devil All the Time. But what do you expect, I guess, right? But
it was beating you over the head the entire time. Tom Holland's character is the shining light in the movie, and that and like Tom Holland does some shady shit in this movie. So I don't want to condone anything he does in this movie.
Sure, but he's like the most sympathetic of any of the characters.
He's certainly the most sympathetic character, and he's certainly the most. He's got his moral compass most like affixed to north as you can possibly hope in something like this, and it just you know, the good guy won in this movie, depending on how you look at it, and. I don't know. I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I enjoy dark shit, which I don't know what that speaks about me, but I enjoy stuff like this. I don't enjoy it actively, like while I'm watching it, because it's obviously very dark, like deep shit, like just bad shit happening all the time. Yeah. But I enjoy the thought process that goes behind making something like this, and the perspective that it lends. Thought it was technically, I think it was a really good movie. Yeah, so I put it as number 4. It was thought provoking, and it was deep, and it was dark, and we were in a dark time of the year, and it was I appreciated it. So, what's your number 4?
So, in looking at my list, I realized there's actually 3 movies, not 2, that I had watched probably within the past week and a half to 2 weeks that are the culprits responsible for Soul's demotion.
Departure, yeah.
Number 4 is Mank for me, which I greatly enjoyed Mank. And what I will say about Mank is, I think it works on its own merits. I think you could enjoy Mank in a vacuum. I think it would be very enjoyable to watch. But I think that the way that I experienced it, I think, is how I would recommend people experience it, which is if you have HBO or HBO Max, I assume it's on both, might just be on HBO Max.
Watch it on your iPhone.
Watch it on your Apple Watch if you can.
Much like a Quibi film.
Style. Watch it in 4 or 5 minute doses, and then pause for a day or a week, whatever, and come back to it.
Fucking Quibi.
That was pretty good. Yeah. How can we talk about 2020 without talking about the demise of Quibi? The birth and the demise, was it the same year? I feel like Quibi started this year. Yeah, fucking launched in the middle of a pandemic. Like, here's for your fucking commute from your toilet to your fucking laptop to hop on your Zoom meetings for work.
Fucking Quibi.
That was good. Kudos. No, my real response of how I recommend watching this is to watch Citizen Kane and then watch Mank fairly shortly after, because the structural similarities between the two are very obvious when you watch them kind of side by side. Maybe not literally side by side, but maybe back to back. Maybe that's the correct terminology. And I think that seeing what the final product of Citizen Kane is very rewarding, because when you look at Mank, there's just a lot of things that you see in Herman Mankiewicz's life that clearly found their way into the screenplay, and they're not totally clearly spelled out in terms of within the movie Mank itself. It's like I said, it's not about the making of Citizen Kane, it's about the writing of Citizen Kane. It's about who Mank was as a person and how that came to inform his screenplay. And I think to see that, obviously through the lens of Orson Welles, who had co-writing credit on it, directed the film, and starred in Citizen Kane, I think it's just a really good 1-2 punch, and I really enjoyed viewing it that way. And as a side note, Citizen Kane is a fucking incredible movie. That is obviously the coldest of takes for a film and television podcast, but I don't know if I'd ever seen Citizen Kane. Maybe that's
I've never seen it
to admit. Maybe that removes my film credits or whatever, but it was a movie made in, I think, 1941, and I have no idea how the fuck how is what I would say about it. I mean, it holds up to this day.
What's it about? Tell me what it's about.
So, it's interesting. It's basically about this kind of larger than life figure who dies, and his last thing that he says is the word Rosebud. And so the frame story is a reporter trying to figure out what the significance is of Rosebud to this big, magnate that just died. And so he interviews people that knew him during his life. And then when he goes to interview someone, then it transitions to a flashback, and you get a little bit of his backstory about Charles Foster Kane. And it does that with like 4 or 5 characters, and it kind of tells this tale of a character, of a man, and it does pay off that kind of mystery at the end, but it's not really the point. It's really about kind of, just this, it's getting perspective on a person, who
through 3 or 4 different perspectives.
Yeah. And movies were very linearly told at that time, and this is a movie that jumped around perspectives and timelines and flashbacks in a way that had never been done before. Through different periods of his life, from a young man to middle age to older, like just hits on a lot of different points in his life. Just really good. It's one of those things, like, you've probably seen a lot of movies do the same type of thing since, but this was the first to do it. And it did it in such a good way that it was, I don't know, I was blown away by the fact of when that movie was made, like before fucking World War II was even over. Just ridiculous. So Citizen Kane is great, and it is on HBO Max. So I throw it out there to you. I throw it out to listeners who maybe haven't seen it. It really does hold up. I think it'll be a timeless film, and it's obviously is regarded as one of the best films of all time. And now I know why. The gap has been filled, I think, overall, and Mank is a really nice companion piece to it. Mank is not as good as Citizen Kane. That's obviously not a hot take either. But Mank is a really, really interesting companion piece, and it's easy to understand why, 20 plus years ago, David Fincher's dad, Jack, wanted to write the screenplay about this guy that ended up writing what is regarded as one of the best films of all time. I think it's an interesting story, and I think it makes for a very interesting film and a very well-made film when you have David Fincher behind the fucking camera. So, it all kind of came together for me. So it's my long-winded explanation of why Mank is number 4 for me. There just happened to be three films that were better. So what is your number 3?
Number 3 is The First Cow.
First Cow, all right. Okay.
So number 3 is The First Cow. I think it's a beautiful...
Heard a lot about it, so...
Yeah, beautifully shot movie. Well-directed. Slow-paced. But I appreciate the story of friendship and of... what it is to be just in dire straits and trying to maneuver out of that. And I think that it's a cool period piece, and I don't know, it's well acted. I enjoy the story. I enjoy the story beats and the different themes that it addresses, and so the contrast of The Devil All the Time. I think The First Cow does leave you with feel good things, even though it kind of ends on a dour note. I think it does leave you feeling good, and I think it's a well-made movie. It's an incredibly well-made movie. So I picked The First Cow.
Well, very good. Number 3 is a film that I don't believe that I've mentioned to this point, but it is a film that appeared in your honorable mentions. It is the only comedy that makes the list in my top 5, and it is Palm Springs.
Okay, yeah, that's a good pick.
Which I just found to be a thoroughly entertaining film. I mean, definitely the funniest film that I saw this year. And it's one of those kind of out of nowhere films dropped on Hulu of all fucking places, and just like 90 minutes of like near comedy perfection, I would say, and just great performances. Like Andy Samberg is good. And then Kristen Milioti, she was fucking awesome,
hilarious,
every bit his equal, and I think maybe even the stronger performer in it. And taking this Groundhog Day, Edge of Tomorrow, conceit, and just kind of turning it on its head with the setting and kind of just being used to it. The way that we get dropped into it is Andy Samberg has been living in this for however long, and you have J.K. Simmons popping out, just fucking trying to kill him every so often. I don't know. It just struck the perfect balance for me of weirdness and funness and hilariousness. It was just funny and out there and weird, and I liked the resolution to it. Like it just didn't really have a weak point for me. It was continuously entertaining throughout. I was a big fan, Palm Springs. Like it just feels like something I could watch, multiple times, and it would still hold up, I think, on repeat viewings. So yeah, Palm Springs ends up at number 3 for me. Down to 2.
Down to two. My number 2 was Trial of the Chicago 7. So
can I jump in?
Yeah, you can jump in. What do you got?
Trial of the Chicago 7 is also my number 2.
Nice.
I just figured we can make this a joint discussion, if you will.
Yeah. So for number 2, we have a film that's set in historical times, based and grounded in historical times, that is still incredibly topical. It's written in a way that is entertaining to watch, incredibly frustrating to watch, and just I can't believe that these things happened.
Yeah. Right.
I can't believe that when you look at the way certain things are still done. I said it in the episode that when I think of the sanctity of the court, you think that there's procedures and there's things that happen that the way that the court is set up is to be completely free of bias, right? It's like you see the blindfolded woman holding the scales of justice. Mm-hmm. And that's the way that it's supposed to be, and that's the way that it is. And that's the way that I think it's intended. And that's the way that I always thought it was. But that's not the way that it is. And I'm sure that there's been progression, but we still live in a world that has biases. Is that a word? Like bias? Yes. Okay, so yeah. and it's incredibly frustrating that people cannot find their justice in the court system. And like it's understanding that things happen outside of the court system, but once it enters the court, it should be black and white, and that's not the way that it is. And it just shed a lot of light, much like Hamilton defined a lot of my historical perspectives and appreciation towards things. This movie has defined a lot about the judicial system that I had no idea about, and that I had no perspective on. And it was well acted. It was incredibly well acted. It was incredibly well written, and it absolutely just blew me away. I think in a vacuum, I think this movie still blew me away, even though it happened in 2020. I have a puddle of movies to draw from. I still think that this movie stands out a cut above the what I would be given on any given year. I think it's an incredibly awesome movie. I think that one thing that I always appreciate is when movies transcend, I enjoy movies. I enjoy watching John Wicks and sci-fi shit and this and that, right? That's what I'm predisposed to. I enjoy those things, but it's really awesome when a movie can be topical and be motivating for change and just make a cultural impact on people in general. And I think this movie has the capacity to do that, and I think it's awesome. So, Trial of the Chicago 7 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you on basically all of the film-specific comments that you made. And obviously, I think the biggest difference between us two is that my knowledge of the legal field is obviously
different,
more extensive than yours.
Absolutely.
That's where I live and breathe, I guess, at this point in my life. So something like the Trial of the Chicago 7 is interesting because of that perspective of like, well, sweet, a courtroom drama. Like, well, that sounds interesting. Like, I know about this thing. I didn't know shit about the Trial of the Chicago 7, the actual Trial of the Chicago 7. It's not something that you cover in law school, which, law school is doctrinal based. It's about like learning what the law is, not about like this really fucked shit that happened one time. But because that's not the law. Like the fact that this happened, that this didn't.
It's an outlier.
Law.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it's not really the kind of thing that you would learn in a law school, but like, it's the kind of thing you should know. You should know about, right? It's a huge fucking deal that they went through this fucking sham of a trial because of
and people lost years of their lives.
Basically.
People lost years of their lives because of this trial.
Yeah.
Years they'll never get back. It's because of a political sham in the way that it was treated in the court system. It's fucking... it's terrible. It's so frustrating.
And I guess, to echo something else you said, it is very much an undermining of what the justice system portends to be, which is, for me, like, I know that the system is broken in many ways, and certainly going back a few decades, it was way more fucked than it is now. But it still has problems now. It's not a perfect system. You make the best of it, and you hope for the best outcomes for everyone involved. But innocent people get convicted all the time. It happens, and I think we hope that it happens on a rarer basis now, and you have organizations dedicated to that cause of basically exonerating innocent people and such. But, there are things that can go wrong in our judicial system. This movie, I think, just does a really critical job of highlighting how it can be used, I think, in sinister and malicious ways. And I think the hope is that obviously is not happening now. You hope that you don't have a Judge Hoffman sitting on the bench here and there of contempt. For,
take him in the back and beat him.
Fucking open your mouth and contempt. Fucking gag this guy. Like what the fuck? Like there's just so many shocking things that happen in this movie, and I don't know. I mean, I was taken aback, not in the sense that like we're treating like a black man unfairly in court. Like that's not shocking information to learn, but just the depths and the lengths of what they did to that guy particularly. I was just like, Jesus, whoa. But this was just a really, really good movie, at its core, and one that obviously highlights this pretty, seems like a pretty major event that obviously happened, and the trials and tribulations that these 7 went through. It's totally insane, totally crazy thing, but a really, really just good version of that. And I know Aaron Sorkin used a lot of the trial transcript, testimony and his dialogue in crafting this screenplay and directing it. And he did a great job. A lot of great actors in it, a lot of great performances in it. Some that we've already recognized, obviously, but beyond Sacha Baron Cohen, Eddie Redmayne was good. Mark Rylance as like the lawyer was good, and hate him for it, but Frank Langella as the fucking judge was, sometimes good acting is making a character the most fucking hateable motherfucker in the world, and he accomplished
certainly
that
did.
with flying colors. You know what I mean? So, Trial of Chicago 7 was just really hard hitting, and illuminating, and it was the kind of movie that, like, I watched it at home on Netflix. Obviously, it was released on Netflix, and I think they did a limited theatrical release for it or whatever. Not that it mattered, like, obviously, because of when it came out, but I find myself pausing movies at home because I have the capability to do so, and I'm like, oh, I just need to pee. I'll take a break. Trial was a movie where I'm just like, I can't stop watching this. Like, I can't look away. And I just think that was because of how well constructed it was as a film, and the topic of it and the acting in it, and just the way it was put together just really, really was a good film. It was a very good film. One of the best of 2020, you might say. Maybe even the second best, you might say. So I would say that. I would say it's the second best of 2020 for me. So that brings us to number one. I was, I was like, shit, I actually thought Trial was going to be his number one. And I was like, what could be his number one? And I thought about it. I'm like, oh, I know. Of course. It very much ties into things that we've talked about very recently. So I was a little bit of a dumbass and not figuring it out sooner. But nonetheless, perhaps the listeners don't know, and you can illuminate them now.
My number one, wholeheartedly, is Soul. Soul is my number one movie. The amount of dedication that went into making the movie, the visual effects of the movie, the sound design of the movie. I know I joked around about it. I think the only thing I said about sound design was the
fly swatter.
The fly zapper of the fucking...
That was Zapper, yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, the sound design of that movie, from the just the way they integrated music to everything, the way that everything in the Great Before happened. I mean, the sound design was excellent. The score, you mentioned the score earlier. I gave Tenet the score because it was just the movie was intrinsically entwined, like you said, with what was happening on screen. It's a core component of Tenet. But the same is true with Soul. You have two different dynamics of the movie. You have the real world, which is based in jazz, and you have everything else that's enraptured in like industrial music or techno or whatever you want to say, just electronic, and etheric kind of sound, and it's really cool. But I think most importantly, it's a movie that could not have been... I've said it a million times, I'll say it again. It's a movie that could not have been released at a better time. You have a world suffering, and you release a movie like Soul that just depicts people or a person that is not where they want to be, but they're not defined by where they are. You know what I mean? And it's incredibly heartwarming. It brought me to tears when I talked about it. I could feel myself I could feel that sensation of choking up a little bit just talking about it, just like up there in the top of my nose. It's incredibly heartwarming. There's a beautiful story to be told within the movie. And like I said, I think the timing is just incredible. It's much like when Disney released fucking Hamilton. They released Soul, and at the end of the year, and everybody's had heartache, everybody's had problems, and you have a movie that you can watch and relate to, and it's really a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful movie, and there's all sorts of drama going on about... I think representation is incredibly important in this movie. You have representation of what it is to be a black person in America in this movie. You have what it is to... There's something there for absolutely everybody. And and it happens to be wrapped up, and by the very definition of absolutely everybody, you even include children. Children will enjoy this movie, but it's like you said, it's a very much adult movie. I mean that's what it is. I can't think of a more hopeful, joyful movie to be in such a dire time than Soul. It's the most uplifting experience you could ever have in a terribly shitty year. And I'm incredibly thankful for it. I felt awesome watching it. I think the 2 or 3 times I've watched it. And I absolutely love Soul. I think it's hands down there's things to gain from movies like the Chicago 7, Hamilton, and I'm going to include Hamilton in the discussion, even though it's kind of excluded from the conversation. There's things to be gained from that, and even like the super dour things that I enjoy, like The Devil All the Time, right? There's things to pull from those movies, but then there's something that just shines, and it's just a beacon of hope, and it's a beacon of how people should be, and what to appreciate when things are looking dour and when things are down. And Soul really just transcends and uplifts wherever you are. It just picks you right up and makes you feel something more. Soul's an incredibly touching movie. I absolutely adore it, and I could not pick a better movie for a better time than Soul for my number 1 pick for 2020.
Well stated. Yeah. Make me feel bad for putting it at number 6. A little bit bad. I shouldn't have watched as many things as I did. It just happened, I suppose. So my number 1 is Mangrove. Film I talked about a couple times.
All right, yeah, I never watched it. Never watched any of them in the short acts.
Yeah, the small acts collection. Yeah, it's all on Amazon, so it's very accessible. Mangrove just hit me in a way that I really, honestly, did not expect it to. I mean, it got great reviews, and I watched it because it got great reviews, and I was excited about it. But it's interesting because I have Mangrove number 1 and The Trial of the Chicago 7 number 2, and they have, I think, very similar sensibilities. And I think they tell very similar stories in terms of just kind of what it is, of just they in some ways center around a sham trial. Like I know I talked a little bit about this already, but I think that what separates Mangrove from Trial from me, I mean, I think that Trial has strengths in some ways. I think maybe the performances across the board are a little better in Trial, and I think the writing is a little snappier in Trial. But I think Mangrove did a better job of, centering on a lead character, I think, of sorts, and just making everything leading up to the trial feel so authentic and feel so real and so earned, so that by the time you got to the trial, when, they're putting this guy up and 8 others on trial for fucking horse shit, it just is infuriating and frustrating. And, when there are victories in the trial, when you got a racist constable that they put up on the stand and they kind of catch him in like a bullshit story, like it just feels vindicating in this way. There's just this sort of warmth that I think Steve McQueen brought to depicting the Mangrove restaurant and the community there in England. I forget exactly the town or whatever it was, like the community that they lived in, but it was basically a lot of people from the West Indies that emigrated there who kind of found togetherness, and it's in West London. I just looked it up so I had it on the record, to kind of have this community, this close-knit community in West London, where they're kind of ostracized from the white people that live in London. Like they don't have a shared cultural experience really, and clearly
completely
the people
segregated
around there don't want them there, and the cops that fucking work the area don't want them there because they think that they're less, they're fucking racist, they target them because of their color of their skin. And you know what? I don't remember exactly where I was going with this, but I'll just say, you know, I think that the way that this film divides its time between, like, it's like 50 to 55 minutes of just setting up this community and feeling that and the warmth of these characters and how they bond with each other, and then it pivots into this trial movie where, like, the last hour really just felt very Trial of the Chicago 7. I mean, it was 9 people in a fucking thing, you know, in a box, and, you know, they've got a jury that they're dealing with and a judge who's a bit of an asshole, not as bad as the judge in Trial of the Chicago 7, fortunately, but still a bit of a shithead. And, you know, it's just, I felt like it balanced those things really well, where neither of them was worse than the other. Like, they were both just really well done. And I think that having that setup made the back half of the movie work even better, I think, than the Trial of the Chicago 7 did, where the trial really was the movie. It's called the Trial of Chicago 7, fair enough. Whereas Mangrove is about Mangrove, the restaurant, and the people and the community that it kind of came to take on. And so that's yeah, I mean, it's a recent, you know, watch, but just, I could just tell, you know, as I was watching it, just the way that it was shot, I was just like, wow, I'm blown away by this. And then by the end, I was just like, that movie turned into a totally different movie halfway through, and I fucking loved it still. And I was just, I don't know, it really did kind of catch me off guard. Like, I know it reviewed well. I know it was
Sounds like
supposed to
it's
be good,
absolutely worth watching, for
but,
sure.
you know, it just really, really struck. It really struck me, I guess, in a big, big way that I maybe didn't expect it to, even if I expected it to be good. Like, I watched other things that, like, Sound of Metal was a recent watch, and Mank was on there, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, even Possessor. Like, they all, like, those are all movies I watched within the past few weeks in preparation for doing this episode. So I'm like, oh shit, I got to watch these things that are supposed to be good that I probably will like anyway, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet, and I made a concerted effort to do so, and I'm glad that I did, because obviously the landscape of this would look radically different otherwise, and Soul would certainly be in the top 5, so I guess that would be good. But, you know, there's just, you know, I think it kind of speaks to what 2020 is. It's just that you kind of had to look in the cracks for some of these movies, I think, overall. Like, you know, and a lot of these movies were streaming movies. Actually, no shit, all 5 of these movies were streaming movies. I mean, it just kind of worked out that way. I mean, some of them got limited theatrical releases, but Mangrove was Amazon, Trial of Chicago 7 was Netflix, Palm Springs was Hulu, Mank was Netflix, and Sound of Metal was Amazon. Like, all 5 movies just released directly to streaming, and I just think that's what 2020 was finding, you know, these non-theatrical movies and finding something to like in them. And I guess, you know, it wasn't the kind of year in film and television that I certainly would have wanted. I wanted my Black Widows, I wanted my Eternals, I wanted my Dunes, you know, I wanted my No Time to Dies, and, you know,
Top Gun.
I wanted my Top Gun. You know, there's all these movies that I wanted to see and I wanted to talk about, and they, you know, and maybe they wouldn't have been in the conversation anyway or whatever, but, you know, I guess the one silver lining, if you have to put it as such, is that you kind of had to look to alternative sources, and so, you know, you had a few movies here that really stood out, and I guess in this way. So yeah, I guess that's 2020, you might say. So what I think we can do as a last kind of send off for 2020 is do a quick edition of the Listener's Corner, the 2020 edition of the Listener's Corner, in which we have just a couple contributions to the Listener's Corner in terms of the best of the year. So we heard from Enrique Jamie, who also graciously contributed to our Chadwick Boseman episode that we did. And he sent in some movies of 2020 ranked. It's basically, it was his list from good to bad, including all of the bad too, so I'll cut it off at a certain point. I'm just going to go with what he kind of gave as his top 10, and he put Hamilton at number 1, so you know, obviously he considers it a film, and fair enough, right? But beyond that, beyond Hamilton, he said Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is something I don't think either of us had watched, and that was one that was like a 2019 awards movie, so kind of a weird one. But he also put Sound of Metal at 3, Soul at 4, The Vast of Night at 5, something we did talk about and cover.
Yeah.
To Five Bloods at 6, Invisible Man at 7, Bacurau, which I believe is a Brazilian film, which is supposed to be pretty good, at 8. I'm thinking of Ending Things at 9, and then On the Rocks at 10, which is it appears to be Bill Murray and Rashida Jones in that, which I'm unfamiliar with that movie, but evidently it's at least his 10th favorite of the year. And Anna Mattis also chimed in with some contributions for this listener's corner. On the TV side of things, she said that The Crown season 4 and The Boys season 2 were her top shows. She kind of we watch a lot of movies together. We pretty much watch most of the movies together, so there's going to be some similarities here. But she kind of said the best new movie to her was Citizen Kane. Obviously, not a 2020 film, but just new film that she hadn't seen prior to then, was Citizen Kane. And her top 5, which is mostly cheating because she picked 3 for 5. So Sound of Metal, Tenet, and Ma Rainey's Black Bottom all tied at number 5. Palm Springs at 4, Mank at 3, Mangrove at 2, and then Trial of the Chicago 7 at number 1. So, like I said, you can see a lot of crossover there. Just the ordering is a little flipped around, I think, for our top 5. So there you have it, a little brief edition of the Listener's Corner for the 2020 edition. And with that, we can finally say, see ya 2020. I don't want to think about you again.
No more.
Too many hours already talking about you. Look, we I think we've tried to glean the positive out of 2020, right? Where we know. But now it's time to say goodbye and to turn the corner, to close the chapter, and to look forward to the remainder of 2021 and hope for bigger and better things, hopefully, to come. And that's something we'll talk about shortly. So for this episode, we'll just say thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please spread the word. If you want to support us on Patreon, we are on patreon.com/watchreviewrepeat. $2 a month will get you access to any forthcoming bonus episodes that we have, as well as early access to all of our regular episodes. Once upon a time, we did a bonus episode for Tenet ever so briefly, and so the intention is that we'll be doing more bonus episodes in the future, such as the long-awaited resumption of our Studio Ghibli coverage, which will happen at some point. Don't you worry. When it happens, it's just going to feel so gratifying. Our website is watchreviewrepeat.com. If you want to get quick access to all of the episodes and the movies that we talked about, TV shows that we talked about, that's one way to do it. Obviously, you can go through iTunes and whatever other podcast things are out there. Spotify, I think we're on Spotify maybe. So we are. I know that for a fact. I don't think anyone listens to us through Spotify, but it's another way. There are channels. Otherwise, you can follow us on Twitter at WRRPod, like us on Facebook at Watch Review Repeat, just by searching for that. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, send those our way, watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. Intro and outro track, Mechanolith by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. And as I said, our next episode is looking ahead, 2021. We'll
Godzilla versus fucking King Kong.
Godzilla versus fucking Kong, Justice League, the Snyder Cut, half the movies that were supposed to come out in 2020. There's some things on tap that we can certainly be looking forward to, and we shall talk about them. So, look forward to our coverage of 2021, and that's it for 2020. Andrew, say goodbye to 2020 with me.
Party on, dudes.
Be excellent to each other, or whatever.